to look at how much money they made, and he said, look, we can pay for the education of every child. You know, it's just I could go on and on. I think I am in love with the man, to be honest. And I met his daughter, Ambassador Awolowo, and I had read.
She said, no, it wasn't all of those things. It was that he saw the future. He understood where Nigeria could go. And more importantly, that he saw his role in it. And then he embraced that role with his entire life. And that scared me, and it got me thinking, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? What is my role? And I guess that may inspire other people here to see what Nigeria can be, what potential it has, and what role specifically each and every one of us has to play in it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll take more people, but please make it short so that we can go more into the sessions. We would always leave the rooms open after every few minutes. So even if you've not completed what you're saying, you still always have an option. Okay.
Okay,
So I
thank
guess
you.
I'll be
Thank
very,
you, my
very
brother
short.
Olu.
Oh,
You just gave me an idea of how to read um, Chief Awolowo's books. So my next flight, I'll be picking one of his books to read during the flight. Thank you so much for that idea.
and I'll be very short, right? This man we are talking about today, remember, Nigeria accused him of treason. And also, remember, while he was doing this, he wasn't poor. I just want to chip that out there as we continue. Thank you.
thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It's always nice to hear other perspectives. And one thing I noticed about Baba Awolowo was resilience. Like Mr. Olu said, this man had resilience. It's beyond measure. But so going forward, right? When he started, he now started talking in his biography about what made Action Group successful. And he said something very important. He said all the other parties at that time, they were wooing the rich people, wooing the middle class, working class, the 1%, but he decided to go grassroots. He wanted to he went to the villages to go and convince the local farmer, to go and convince the local dressmaker. He went grassroots. Those were the people he believed that his calling was sent to cater for. And those are the people he wanted to connect with. And he said this in his book, and I'm reading from his biography now again, going on with this. We're going to be reading from about 3 books about Awolowo. We're just starting from the biography, so it probably would be a long day. So, reading from page 226, 226, it says, so this was when he was talking because he was really scared of Zeke. Because Zeke had what it takes to scuttle the whole party. So he had to nurture it like an egg and keep it away from what he considered a predator. And he said, these are the ideas of the action group and the principles of action by which the party had been consistently guided during the brief 10 years of existence. The action group has made a decisive impact on party politics and political thoughts in Nigeria, such as no political party before or after it has ever done. It was the action group that, for the first time in the history of Nigeria, carried party politics and political consciousness to the rural areas and the country peasants. It has provoked the establishment of the rival political parties. The NCNC was converted into a political party with individual membership only after the action group had been publicly inaugurated. Before the action group Before the action group, party politics such as there was and had been conducted on the basis of personal abuses and mudslinging. Okay, so he was just talking about party. The way party was is just shaming people, abusing each other, and you can see from the way they talk in the Daily Times and the comment. So he was the first person now that started saying, "Look, I don't want to have a political party by just mesmerizing people, or it's not a class society. I want to have a party. I want to have a political party where I make myself liable to the people, connect with the grassroots, promise them the things that I would do, and make sure I deliver on each of the promises." And that was where the name Action Group came from. Now, one of these big problems with Zeke was that Yoruba people are not tribalistic in nature. So a Yoruba man will not support you because you're a Yoruba person. That's not how we operate. So if a Yoruba man thinks that another person is a better leader, they will follow that person and turn their back on their own Yoruba person. And so this can be good and this can be bad. So they're the last people you can use tribal sentiments to appeal to. That is why the concept of Egbe Omodutua was a very sensitive thing for him. And this is what he said in page 263 of his biography. He said, the disadvantages, on the other hand, were numerous, but counted from naught in the face of the state of mind which we adopted towards our historic and noble assignment. Only some of them need be mentioned in addition to those which were already explicit in the problems to which I have adverted in the earlier part of this chapter. The people of the Western region were the people of the Western region may be divided roughly into two groups, the Yoruba and the non-Yoruba. The Yoruba are a fastidious, critical, and discerning people, but they will not do anything in politics merely to oblige a fellow Yoruba man. If the Yoruba man is satisfied that your policy is good and will serve his self-interest, he will support you no matter from which ethnic group you hail from. A large number of them were members and supporters of NCNC at the time that we took office. As a matter of fact, I held the view that if in 1951 the NCNC had been as well organized in the rural areas as we were, it would have stood a good chance of winning elections. So these are two things that I took from there. That one, the fact that you're a Yoruba man and you speak the language of Yoruba people does not mean you can take them for granted, or does not mean that they will continue to suffer, and you try to shame a Yoruba man to saying, "Ah, no, he's your brother, Tiwani, Ejeoshi." That's not the concept. I don't know if that has changed now, because I see some interesting things going on in our time. But at the time of Awolowo, that was their thought pattern. That was one. And two, because it connected to the grassroots. Yes, rank Adede in a minute. Were you
Yes,
flashing?
I was going to mention that, Bonka, that you should lay emphasis on the grassroots connection by way of his politics activities. He was connected. He was heavy on grassroots politics, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, in fact, guess what? He lived in Okebola. He did not live in his official appointment. When I saw the house he was living, I was shocked. He was, those houses in Ibadan that they're clustered. It's not like the Bodija. It was around that place that Awolowo was living, and I was
Okeado area.
Okeado. Yes, Okeado, not Okebola. But he was in a clustered around with the people. For some reason, he just loved to be around people. His energy came from being around the common man, not from sitting and having dinner with Her Majesty in England and things like that. And I guess that's also another interesting thing to observe about him. But now, um, this was how we checkmated NCNC, like we've read, and I think I read page 218 and 19. Before I go on, let me check it again. Okay. So yeah, there's no need. We'll move on. So now, they said that is a tribal party, right? So, but he's saying that no, it's not a tribal party. He now explained how AG started, and he said this in page 249 and 250. And this was what he said. He said, several accusations have been leveled against the action group that it is a Yoruba organization and offshoot of Egbe Dudua, that it is a party with a Western regional outlook and following, and that it is a party which does not believe in the unity of Nigeria. Many overseas journalists and visitors have been made innocent purveyors of this accusation. They can be excused because they have never been in possession of the true and detailed facts about the action group narrated in this chapter. It is true that when the action group was founded, it was meant to be a Western region political party. But it must be remembered that the party had as its primary objective the winning of the then approaching Western region elections. In any event, excuse me. In any event, in view of the then existing political situation, it would have been cross-folly for me to attempt to bring leaders of other regions into the fold of the action group at the early stages. It was imperative, therefore, that I should take measures that I should okay, that I should it was imperative, therefore, that I should make sure that those who were induced into the secret activities of the party were people whose political leanings I could trust, and in whose loyalty to the new party I could absolutely believe in. I lost complete after the Ikoli and Akisaya crisis of 1941. We spoke about the Ikoli and Akisaya crisis in our last session. So he was talking about it that after that, that he lost complete touch with his Igbo friends. He said, after the Ikoli Akisaya crisis of 1941, I lost complete touch with my few Igbo friends and colleagues. They regarded me with suspicion, and I found it hard to trust them either. Furthermore, because I had dared to criticize Dr. Azikiwe publicly, I had incurred the wrath of many Easterners. At that time, too, I knew very little of the northern region and its politicians. That was why I concentrated on the western region. So you can see now that it happened because he was a victim of circumstance, but it wasn't that he wasn't looking at the bigger picture. He just realized that in this situation, charity must start at home. So eventually it transformed into a federal party. It became an official opposition in the eastern region and in the northern region. And I think he said it here as well. Uh, the actual group. So, okay, so if we won the elections in the West and there was still no countrywide political party in whose leadership we believed in, we would have no alternative but to launch action group in the eastern and northern region. And this was what we, in fact, began to do before the end of 1952. It was difficult going to start with, but today, due to the assiduity of its leaders, the Action Group of Nigeria is truly nationwide organizations with branches in every town, village, and hamlet in the country. It is in control of the government of the Western region and the official opposition in Eastern and Northern House of Assemblies. So even though it started as a regional party, it actually ended up as a federal party to the limit that it was possible at that time. So now, Awolowo was talking about what made his party successful, and one thing he spoke about is loyalty. He had somebody then that was very loyal to him, and his name was Body Thomas. After the death of Body Thomas, things started to go spiral. And then he talked about some very hardworking ministers he had. So now this was in page 261 of his biography, and it reads thus. So it says our team. Okay, it said our team of three was led by Chief Body Thomas, who was then my deputy. Chief Thomas was an exception. I mean, we remember Body Thomas. He was the guy He was the young man that the Alaafin of Oyo placed the curse on, and he died in the process, and it will lead to him being removed as Alaafin. So Chief Thomas was an exceptional character in a number of ways. He had a rare gift of intuition, which bordered on the prophetic. Whenever we had acted in accordance with his warning and advice, we had been the happier for it. But on a few occasions that we had rejected them in deference to the force of logic, we regretted doing so. He was a brilliant lawyer with a quick and acute perception of abstruse legal technicalities. He had a peculiar temperament. He had a peculiar temperament which alternated with perfect ease between alluring, persuasive calm and roaring tempest. So what he was saying here is that Bode Thomas could be quick to be angry, and he was also quick to be calmed down. But he said we all adored him for his unique endowment, and he and had no doubt in our minds that in the Council of Ministers he would successfully construe some of the provisions of the new constitutions the way we wanted them to operate. With Bode Thomas at the center was also S.L. Akintola, also an able lawyer. He is a breezy, affable character who cannot be ruffled easily, if at all. His peculiar gift consists of his capability to argue and defend two opposing points of view with equal competence and plausibility. He also had a great sense of humor, and his capacity for nonsense made him an insoluble puzzle to other opponents. So I want to Akintola had a way of making jokes. I mean, we remember all his jokes. Somebody was saying that he was corrupt, that Okowoje, that he chopped a lot of money. And he said, I will ask my wife at home when I'm doing number two, that's person excreta. I will ask her to check if there's money in it. If you said that I chop money. That's how he jokes. He was very good at making jokes. Yeah, hold on. Let me close my door. Okay. So so these were the earlier formations of the party at that time, and he was talking um about the stuff going on, and it goes on page 262. Mm. So there were some ministers that he gave praises to for the success of Action Group, and he said, "When I took charge of the Western region on 6th February 1952, I made careful survey of all the advantages and disadvantages. If the goose was scientifically tended and mused, it would lay golden eggs, and in many cases, the setting of amenities would not present the same problems. So, second, my team of ministers were unexcelled. It was a team of which any head of government anywhere in the world would be proud of. It was a well-knit, highly disciplined, and fanatically loyal team. Each of them knew his subject well. It may look invidious to single out one or two for special mention where all are deserving of praise, but I cannot help but mentioning three of them because of the deep lasting impression which they made on my mind. So he wants to talk about the three ministers that made his government a very, very successful one. And the first one he mentioned was S.O. Awokoya, an exceedingly competent scholar, eh, scholarly and haughty. He was in charge of education, and it was his assignment to ensure the launching of our free primary education scheme by January 1955. There was Mr. E.A. Babalola as well, a minister in charge of works, a rugged, dynamic man with a rigid schoolmaster's mentality. At any given time, he knew what was to be done and how to get it done. To him, a timetable was a timetable, and it was made to be religiously adhered to, both in the school and in the execution of public works. And then there was His Highness Aholujiwa II, the Oba Akran of Badagry, who I always fondly refer to as Aga Khan of Badagry. He is more or less absent in his domain, a quiet man with an unimpeccable sense of duty. His portfolio in 1952 was development, and he had the astonishing grasp of his problems. So these were all the three people that Awolowo mentioned out to be his most special of all his lieutenants. So now, on the importance of education and why Baba was so important of education, he said it on page 271 of his biography, and he said, because of a truly educated citizenry, in my view, is one of the most powerful deterrents to dictatorship, oligarchy, and feudal autocracy. So he believes that if people would ever be able to stand up for their rights and be able to resist autocratic governments, they need to be enlightened and educated. And as you can see, almost every fall of a dictator in Nigeria is always spearheaded from the western region. Just go and take a look at it from Balewa to Babangida. You will see that the Western region plays a big role in rejecting tyranny. If you look at the Wettier days, when they stood up against Akintola, when they stood up against Agashin, I mean, all those things they did at that time, you will understand where Baba Awolowo was coming from when he was saying these things. So he said, a truly educated citizenry, in my view, is one of the most powerful deterrents to dictatorship, oligarchy, and feudal autocracy. The last two are very much present with us in most parts of Nigeria, and the fulminations of some Nigerian political leaders do strongly suggest the possible emergence of a dictator could not be entirely ruled out sometime in future. Unless the citizens are sufficiently educated to know their individual rights and to cultivate enough courage to resist any encroachment on those rights. Education, in the true sense of the word, is the only solution because it gives the citizen a correct and wider perspective of the things of this world and makes him a good neighbor to his fellow men. So this was why education was very important to him because he didn't want tyranny to exist. The same way you see it existing in the north. Come what may, with all the sufferings they are going through, the next election too, anybody that comes out in the north, they will still vote. Even if this man had an opportunity for a third term, that's Buhari, you will see that he will still get the votes of the north because they are not an educated people. They've been relegated to Almanjiri status. And so whatever their clerics, their imams, their leaders that feed them tell them to do is called Rankadidi. And Rankadidi is on stage. So what Awolowo is trying to do is eradicate the Rankadidi mentality in Yoruba society. And to a large extent, at that time, he was successful. So we're going to go to, okay, I want to go to his resilience on education, but do we have someone that wants to add something for a minute? Any contributions so far? None. Okay. So we go on. As I said before, hello, can people still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, okay. Okay, so now reading for this. So now, by the way of illustration, the estimated capital cost for education and health alone amounted to 10 million pounds, whilst the recurrent expenditure on the same items was expected to go up to about 3 million during the 1954 to 55 fiscal period. As against this, the total revenue available for capital and recurrent expenditure was 4.95 millions. Where would the required money come from? This was the question. And it was a question which had to be tackled with speed and success if we were to redeem our promises to the electorate. I decided to do everything possible to save money on approved capital estimates. I placed an embargo on the expenditure on a number of building projects, such as staff housing. I ruled that government staff, whether white or black, must go and hire houses wherever they could find them at Ibadan. and no houses should be built for them again, so that the money can be transferred into education. I applied for a grant from the Cocoa Marketing Board to meet part of the capital expenditure. This was turned down. I had a brain wave. See, that's a leader. He was thinking of how to educate his people, and he's having brain wave. Hmm. The capital. So anyway, let me summarize this. After it didn't work out, he decided that he wants to do mud buildings. He wants to create mud houses and use that for schools. And the Ministry for Works rejected it. The Federal Ministry for Works. So this was all the things he was going through. The saving grace for him was the Oliver Lytton Constitution. And when that constitution was given, the federal post was deregulated. So all the money that was coming from cocoa, it didn't go to the federal post anymore. It came to the western region. But before that time, he decided that he was going to tax the people and he was going to give it £10. So he said, we decided to impose a levy of 10, is it? I think it's 10 shillings, not £10. 10 shillings on all adult male taxpayers. It said 10 dash. I don't know what that dash means. Either it's pounds or shillings, but I'm guessing it's shillings. So it said, we decided to impose a levy of 10 shillings on all adult male taxpayers. At my request, this was done. When the resolution seeking the approval of the legislature for this tax levy was imposed in 1953, the opposition led by Dr. Azikiwe got angry. They denounced the levy and suggested that the society cannot afford such a levy and education was not so important. A first and ferocious agitation against the tax measure, mainly instigated by NCNC, followed in certain parts of the region. It got very ugly that Adelabu Penkelemes at that time, right? He was going to all the villages and telling them that this man is out to make your life miserable. He was going to take your children from you. You won't be able to use them in the farms anymore. And if you understand how things were in those days, right, you will know that those men used to have a lot of kids. They used to marry a lot of women and have a lot of kids so that they can use them as farm labor. So now somebody taking them away and putting them in school and actually now having to tax them to do that is like double loss for them. I won't have the farm hand I need anymore. And at the same time, I have to pay for my kids to be away. So you see how Adelabu was trying to manipulate that to his advantage. But he has been able to connect to the people at the grassroots very well. And they were able to understand what he was doing. So he was able to negotiate with them about how he intended to bring in mechanized farming at some point, where they will be able to register in cooperatives and be able to use tractors and stuff on their farm, and also get the right seedlings, and they will require less labor. But it didn't do the damage that he thought that it was going to do at that time. So that was how it all went at that time, the back and forth and stuff like that. So yes, so he now said that this was what was going on when in 19, so he said, sorry, I'm trying to get, okay, so this was going on, and if we were to walk, I'm reading from 279 now, if we were to walk to our target of starting the free primary education scheme in January of 1955, expansion of teacher training must commence in January 1953. This was done, and for a start, we made use of hired houses. So they've not even figured out how they were going to get the money to build the schools, but they were already sending the people into training, the teachers into training in preparation. So this was how determined and resilient it was that a miracle will happen one day. And I want us to understand something. The Western region at this time was run as a country. It wasn't run as a state. In fact, it had the power to print its own currency, but it had to be regulated by England. It had its own embassy in England. That embassy that became Nigerian embassy today was actually This was actually Nigeria Western Region House. So it was run as a country of its own, independent of the bigger picture. So most of the things that they were doing then, they were doing it as if Yoruba was a country. Now, they said this was done, and for a start, we made use of hired houses. Free medical treatment for the children up to 18 years of age was introduced in 1953, and all other schemes were also introduced on a skeletal scale. We didn't have the finance to run them on the scale we wanted, but a miracle I was expecting occurred. When the result of the alliance between Action Group and NCNC came, I used it to lobby for the commodity marketing boards, which were controlled by the federal government, to be regionalized. And allocation of revenues now was made in accordance with the principles of derivation. By means of the former, an accumulated revenue of £34 million was transferred to the Western region, and as a result of this, our revenue rose from £6.3 million in 1953 to £13 million in 1954. The initiative for both of these measures came from the Action Group and NCNC. Azikiwe later regretted his action when he saw that it led to success, but I saw no regret in what happened on my part. So it was from this deregulation that he now got the money that he needed to do all the things that he set out to do. So on farming, we are going to go on the interesting things of what caused the problem between him and Akintola and the roles their wives played. You will be shocked to know that the tension between Akintola and Awolowo, it was their wives that contributed the lion's share to that fight. If those women had not let their ego in the way and they've helped direct their husbands in the right directions, it probably would not have gone the way it went. It was a clash of ego. Mama Faderera Akintola wanted to have the status of first lady like Awolowo, but Western region still hailed HID Awolowo as the first lady, and this caused a kind of interesting clash of ego, which we're going to talk about very soon. But there was another thing that he did, which was very important, and that had to do with farming. And this was page 284. He said, "Excuse me, our biggest, excuse me, wow, I hope I'm not messing up the recording." So he said, our biggest source of wealth was cocoa and oil palm produce. But the fact that we were dependent on these two main crops only makes our economy shaky and precarious. All the same, we were determined to make the best of what we had, whilst we explored every avenue for diversifying our economy. Cocoa, oil palm produce, and rubber thus became the subjects of intensive research. Advice was made available to farmers who were engaged in these crops. By the way of illustration, under the rubber implementation scheme, 90 or so seedlings of high yielding clones were distributed in 1958. 300,000 were distributed in 1959. Over 6 million seedlings of the high yielding Amazon variety cocoa were available for planting by farmers in 1959. When we assumed office in 1952, blackboard was a dreaded disease. Today, they have been completely overcome. By the end of 1959, 28,500 farmers have been trained and 32,453 pest control have also been trained in pest control measures. So he was talking, he went on and on. I don't want to bore you with the stories. So he opened a bank and they to give loans and assistance at low interest rates of 5% to farmers. They started the cooperative societies. We're going to be going into that soon. And we're going to talk about also his prison trials. We're going to talk about the role Fani Kayode played. You know, Fani Kayode father and son. It's like history repeating itself. First, they romanticized with the Igbos. The father did that by going to NCNC. Then they romanticized with the lower class people. Fani Kayode Senior did that at Ife with the Talaka Parakwo. And if you go to the son's earlier rhetorics, right, you will see the way he used to bash the government on behalf of the local people in Yoruba land. Then most of them would eventually dump both Igbos and Yorubas and go back to the Fulani people. Fani Kayode did that. Him and Akitola went back to Fulani people, and the son, well, you know what he did recently. So maybe it's a DNA thing, but we're gonna we're gonna talk about Fani Kayode's interesting the role he played during Awolowo's dark moment. We're going to talk about the kings, the monarchy that Akintola and Fani Kayode went after because of their support for AG. So we're now really going to now go deep into the historical sessions. This is just the preambles to set the stage for the things that were happening. So the floor is open once again. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
can I
so
quickly
much,
say?
Mr. Bunker. Mr. Lu, I know you have some comments. Please go ahead.
Okay, someone had mentioned earlier that Awolowo was not a poor man, and I agree with that. But also, you must understand that he was not an elite. He was an ordinary Nigerian that had been through all the travails that any Nigerian will go through. So he had an experience of what it meant to be poor. At some point, he lost all his goods in business. If you read his autobiography, you'll see where his goods were auctioned off. And also, you would find out that at some point, he served as a houseboy to somebody. So I just wanted to mention that so that we don't think that he was a bourgeoisie. He was not. That's one. The other thing I wanted to talk about was his attitude towards healthcare. He had a very, very he had the his idea about healthcare and why he promoted healthcare for all was that he saw disease as the enemy of man. He felt that if a man was diseased, then his productivity would be reduced. And so it was the duty of government to also make sure to attack disease so that people could be more productive. So he was philosophical in his approach towards healthcare. It wasn't just healthcare and education for the sake of it. It was because he had these philosophical ideas about what healthcare and education would do. One would free the mind of man, the other one will set a man's body free and make it productive. Yes, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Are you an Aoist?
Of course
I
he is.
I am a direct beneficiary.
Oh yeah.
I was born in Ibadan. I grew up in Bodija Estate, the first planned estate that he built in Ibadan. I went to University of Ibadan, and I learned just from my environment that somebody had done something there intentionally, and I was a beneficiary of that intention. So it was my duty to find out why he did what he did and what my role is supposed to be. Thank you.
So let me
Wow.
clarify when I said Awolowo was not a poor man, right? And I think it's important our brother brought it up. There are three main ideology that our brother brought up right here. Yes, he wasn't poor while he was doing all these things, but he came from poverty. Secondly, for healthcare, remember his father actually died of an epidemic, just like the coronavirus. I
Chokono.
think it was chicken pox, right? So he understood what the importance of healthcare was. And
And sorry to
personally,
cut in, that also affected his education.
exactly that's where I'm actually going. Similarly, he has impairment in education before he was educated. So these three things like poverty, healthcare, and education are a thing he as a person was personally affected by, and he turned those three around, but he wasn't selfish with it. When he figured out how to crack this code, you know what he did? He came to his people and he offered it to them for free. Thank you.
Thank you so
Um,
much, G
Sorry,
Baba.
please, can I have one more comment?
Please go ahead, Mr. Olu.
Okay. I
Yeah.
also noticed something from the archives of ITN. Awo believed in people. He believed that they could understand. So he believed in the dignity of the ordinary Nigerian. And I'll use two examples. One, there's a picture in his library. You see, he went to a village, and in that village, people were not wearing clothes. And what he went to say to them in that village was that they should give him, Action Group, the vote and then pay their taxes. And they would use the taxes to build roads and build schools for their children and give free healthcare and all of that. Now, that is instructive because he saw that they were not wearing clothes. Yet he spoke this, it distilled this idea and he believed that they will understand. The second one was a video I watched of his first campaign in the north. He arrived in the northern fields in a helicopter, and he got down and he said something very interesting. He said, "Give me your money." That is interesting. I mean, today's politician would actually go and start distributing money to people. But he said to the northern peasantry, he said to them, "Give me your money," meaning give me your taxes and watch what I will do with your taxes. So it shows someone that believes in the dignity of people, that people will understand if you speak to them, if you explain what you want to do to them, do for them, that there is still a part of people, whether they are poor, whether they are peasants, whether they are farmers, whether they are not wearing clothes. If you distill down the basics of government, what government really means, people would understand. And that is encouraging for me personally. Thank you.
Sorry, could I just add
Yes,
some
please go
question?
ahead, Brian.
Yes. I obviously am Igbo and I went to school in Akure. So my question to Bonka is whether because um, I did agricultural engineering in university. So the couple of things I noticed in the southwest, even though at the time some of those things had been run down, but obviously I came at the end, just at the end of when what's the governor's name again? The not is it Ajashin or something? Anyway, so I wanted to ask you what you felt was unique because about the marketing boards, that approach to agriculture, that's where you could get communities together, you build some level of infrastructure there and have that complement the agricultural community. Thank you.
So what he did was something called cooperatives. So they will bring all the farmers together and then they will have a cooperative. So the thing he was doing at the marketing board, he wanted the farmer to just concentrate on planting and developing his crops. So hello, hello.
Uh, your audio is a little cracky, but yeah.
Can I be heard better now?
Yes,
Yes,
Or
please
no?
go.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So he started something called a cooperative system, and so in that cooperative, what he was doing was that he would tell all the farmers that I'll give you the seedlings, just concentrate on your crops. So he now did what you call mechanized farming. They would bring all the tractors to each community and they would take turns to go to people's farms to help them with things that they were using manual labors to do. When the crops are ready, the marketing board will come and pick them. The farmers don't have to worry about where they're going to be sold, how they're going to be sold. The marketing board will come and pick them and sell them and then give them a fixed rate. So they made their own profit from the marketing board from reselling and then profiting from the margin. So now another thing very ingenious that Awolowo did, they invited a lot of blue chip companies. They invited like Cadbury, like Nestle, Guinness, bottling companies, but they insisted on them that the raw materials that they will use for their product must be sourced locally. So the things they were using in making Guinness beer, doing all those things, they were being sourced locally. And it actually became a blessing for a company like Guinness in disguise because the Guinness that they do in Nigeria is the best in the world because the things were sourced locally. So now on the situations where they can't they have to export them abroad, they did the negotiations, and I'm surprised that D is not here. I wish D was here because if D was here, D would have been able to explain to us how Awolowo forced his members in the marketing board to travel all across the world and get buyers for their cash crops, especially cocoa, rubber. So they will go to the London Stock Exchange, the New York Stock Exchange, and the Tokyo Stock Exchange, and then place negotiations there so that when they buy the products, they send it to them. So all they did is help the farmer to concentrate on farming and guarantee him that there will be no fluctuation in the prices of his products, ensure that he got the right seedlings. It was around that time, if you notice, all the important agricultural companies are in Ibadan, from IITA to NIHOT to which is the other one. There are a couple of them. You will see that they usually always, in fact, I think IITA at Ibadan then used to be the headquarters for all of tropical West Africa. So the reason was because that was the hub for agriculture. Another thing Awolowo did was that he was negotiating with the Jewish people. They were the best in construction and they were the best in agriculture. So what he was doing was what you call cooperative and integration. So he was bringing the grassroots, connecting them to the city, and everybody was happy in the process. So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but we'll get to breaking down some of those things as the session goes on.
Can I add to that? Um, what you said is very, very true. And the reason why I'm also adding is because I remember that part of his campaign rhetoric, and I know this from one of his books, was that to the farmers that he will give them access. He would create access to foreign markets for their goods. So that was part of his campaign rhetoric to people at the grassroots, that the action group would help to take their goods from their from the farms and take it to international markets, and that when the international markets buy their goods, they would tax it, they would take a small percentage in taxes, and they would use to build roads, build schools, and give health care to them. Yeah. And the institute you wanted to mention, I guess, is Cocoa Research Institute, Kingston.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yeah.
yes.
Yes. I actually went there as a child. Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you so much. Do we have any other comments? If you're in the audience and you'd like to come up, please raise your hands and we can have you. G Baba, please go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, I just want to talk about the local sourcing of material. So in 1933 here in America, I think that was during Roosevelt, right? He actually enacted the Buy American Act. And the thing is this, up till this day, the Buy American Act is still in operation. It's been amended over time. And what it does is it says for any government contract, any contractor must get all their materials made here in America. If you have to import it from outside, you must provide a very solid justification. And there are certain countries that were actually are not allowed. You are not allowed to buy in certain countries, e.g., China. I think that's the same concept, but the problem with us in Nigeria is imports Nigeria from everywhere now instead of locally sourced for material. I just wanted to add that caveat.
All right. Thank you, G Baba. Olalekan, please go ahead, my brother.
Yeah, to add to that, just buttress that point. At Tonwishola along the Senyi Road is a Badon farm settlement where everything was built. If you see that farm, they have an old farm, they have a new farm. In fact, we just neglect that place. You need to go there and see the vast investment that the Western government did in that place, including farmhouse. They have farmhouse in that place, and nobody's using that place. Maybe few people are using that place. So Awolowo did so much. God bless Abada Baba. Thank you.
Not
All right, thank you
sure
so
whether
much.
anybody remembers whether there's a livestock place. These names have escaped my head, but I know there was a very big livestock place in the southwest back then that came from his legacy. That basically they used to do research on breeding. They used to do like even veterinary medicine uh, I think it was cattle breeding. If anyone remembers, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Bonka.
Yes, we're gonna get to the cattle ranches he did, uh, very soon. But before then, we want to talk about, they say behind every successful woman is a woman. So let's talk about Mama Chaidi Awolowo. So before we go there, I want to tell you something about Awolowo's personality. It's not about the way he thinks alone. He's a very principled man, super principled. He measured. He had what you call a Spartan discipline, and he was a vegetarian. He never ate meat except snail. He measured the intake of food, the calories of food he took every day, measured the amount of water he took every day. That was how meticulous Baba was. Baba never had any girlfriend before Mama HID, and up until his death, he never had a mistress. It was only one woman throughout his life. So, so sometimes that's why sometimes when you read about him, you wonder if he's human or Orisha. Because the level at which he operated, it's a very very interesting one. But he was talking about his wife, and he said she was introduced to him by her uncle, Chief Olajimi Olatunde. And like I said, prior to that, she had no woman. She was born in Ikene. Her parents were Moses Adelano and Elizabeth Adelano. She went to St. Saviour's Anglican School, Ikene, and was the first distributor of Nigerian tobacco. He was also the managing director of the Deolu company. So this was where she actually blew out before she started becoming the sole distributor of many um, blue chip companies. Um, Most of the things that Awolowo did, he named it the Deolu. So anybody that grew up in Lagos will know a place called the Deolu Court. It was around Ogba, not the Deolu Estate on the island. The Deolu Court at Ogba. He built it in the 1970s, and he thought he was going to be president, but he did not want to live in the official quarters. He planned to run the country from the Deolu Court, and he built it as different chalet of houses where he and his ministers would always kind of live close to each other so that they can have access to each other and kind of deliberate far into the night about things they need to do. And it was that time he started learning. Is Mr. Lu still on stage? Mr. Lu, hello, can you hear me, Mr. Lu? Oh, I think he's
I'm here. I'm here.
yes. So you will see that at Ikene, there were some things that look like machineries that they put in a show glass, like things like cars and machines, but they are small.
Right.
So that was in the
Like
70s when Awolowo started trying to get exposed to industrialization. So he was looking forward to build Nigeria into an industrial hub. He wanted Nigeria to start building their own cars, their own heavy machineries. So he wanted to explore an industrial revolution for Nigeria. So he started discussing with people in Japan, in America, that understood machinery technology. But lo and behold, abracadabra, what fella calls government magic happened, and we were robbed of the chance to be ruled by a man like Awolowo. So they had 7 children among themselves.
Sorry, can I
And
quickly say before you move on from
yes,
industrialization, one of the things I noticed in his library was that he had a lot of small books like idiot's guides, right? So he had like the guide to electricity. He would read, basically what he was doing was that he was reading everything, even to the basics of the history of electricity, how it came about,
absolutely.
what was, and he would make small scribbles on each side of those small books, and that was interesting to see. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So between Awolowo and his wife, they had 5 children, and the children were Mrs. Tola Oyediran, Oluwole Awolowo, Oyedele Soyode Awolowo, Tokunbo Dosunmu Awolowo, and the eldest, Segun Awolowo, who was trained he became a lawyer from Cambridge. And when his dad was incarcerated, he was running up and down to submit documents on behalf of his father and trying to help him with an appeal. And unfortunately, he died of a motor accident. But looking at the elements of that death, there's an element of, I don't know. I'm gonna get there because it didn't sound like an act of God to me. That's maybe I'm just. We'll get there. And probably we'll be able to discuss about that. But let me not derail the topic now. So Awolowo describes his wife as a very important source of his success. Now, this is what I'm going to read about interesting conversations between them. Maybe we could learn one or two things about marriage, especially for women. They think of us men as we're ingratitude. I've heard a lot of women saying, I can never suffer for a man again. But there are still some men that appreciate a woman that stands by them in the days of in the days of want. And this is why I want to read this part especially. And it's part at page 8. And this is what Awolowo said about his wife. I do say many years back that my success depended on 3 things. One is the grace of God, two is a good wife, and three is a Spartan self discipline. My wife means a lot of things to me. She is a very she is a very sagacious and cute businesswoman. When I went abroad to study law, she was able to keep the home front with 4 children. I had 3 children already, and they were Shegun, Tola, and Wale. While I was abroad, Ayo was born. She came in December 3. She came in December 3, or she came in December 3 or 4 months after I left UK. Not only that, you see, you are able to appreciate a person's qualities in time of crisis. That is when you know if that person is a good or bad person, whether to see that person in time of peace as well as in time of crisis. My wife stood firm behind me like the rock of Gibraltar. Nothing destroys a man's morale more than the infidelity of a woman. My wife was totally faithful to me, especially in times of crisis. My wife is absolutely faithful to the vow of our marriage, and I did the same thing to myself. So this was what he was saying. Now, this is what his wife had to say. She said, before he left Nigeria, this is Mama HID talking now. Before he left Nigeria, we both talked of traveling together so that later we decided against it. So when he was going, the plan was that he would go with his wife and the children. No, that he would go with his wife. So not the children. So as I had no sister or brother of the same mother to leave the children with, I was an only child. I had to stay behind to take care of the children. Awo, on the other hand, did not want me to work under anyone. So I left my teaching job and got into business. trading, I must say, had been a feature of maternal lineage. I began to import goods from England to sell. I imported shoes, handbags, all which I sold for profit. I began with a shop at home, but I later got myself a shop somewhere on Lebanon Street at Ibadan. With proceeds from my commerce, I took care of my children and sent money to Awolowo in England for his studies. I usually did this with comforting letters that all was well at home, even though sometimes all was not well. I did that just to give him peace of mind so that he could study and concentrate on his books. Wow, that's powerful. Well, any comment on that? Can we have women talk here, please?
To me, I think it sounds like a good romance.
Wow,
Let
wow.
me let me bring our women up. Uh, let's see what they've got to say to that. Adedoyin Ayike. Oh yeah, Ayike. Yoruba goddess. Chika ran away. uh, okay. Please, you're welcome on stage. Ayike and Adedoyin, what have you guys got to say to that?
I can't say anything right now. I'm kind of like in the kitchen and I'm listening on my Bluetooth speaker. Maybe in some minutes I'll be able to make a comment or two. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, my sister. My sister Adedoyin.
I am also in the kitchen making breakfast, but
What's it with kitchen today now?
there's really nothing sexier than a woman that caters for her husband and can put things, you know, there for him to succeed because you are his helpmate. So it is a love story that I'm enjoying. So I'm just gonna listen and reserve my comments for later.
Okay, thank you.
Please let's
Could we-
let's hear from my sister Korikosun. I'm sorry, Mr. Bonka. I skipped that over.
absolutely, yeah.
Morning, everybody. Good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are. I think what you give is what you get, honestly. I think Awolowo is a very conscious man and what he eats and how he thinks and everything. And so it is not surprising that a man like that would definitely treat his wife right. And women love to be treated good. So it's a very beautiful love story. So Awolowo is an example of what you give is what you get. What you take in is what you give. Garbage in, garbage out. you know. And we women love a very intelligent and conscious man. And that's what flower is. And
So what
she's a
what
woman
you're
that,
saying is that Auntie Corey, what you're saying is that her behavior is because Awu himself was good to her. Auntie Corey?
I mean, listening.
No, I'm asking a question now. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Yeah, exactly. I think her behavior is because Awo himself gives what what it takes for a woman like that, you know, for a woman like that to cherish and love him back. So if he was a man that treats her like garbage or doesn't consider her opinion, you know, she won't, she won't, she won't give it back. That's what I'm trying to say, sir. Yes. So what Awo gives is what she gets. What is what he gets back. You know. So that makes a beautiful love story.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
So she must have been a very intelligent woman to pick a man like Awolowo. You know. Well, she is a very intelligent woman to pick a man like that. You know.
Thank you
I,
so much.
I
Mr.
actually want to quickly I wanted to quickly read how Awolowo toasted her and her reaction. So she said, as Awo began to propose love to me, I caught him and told him I had no interest. That was in 1933. We met at a friend's house. One remarkable thing I recalled was that Awo was not shy at all. He was very frank in pouring out his mind, and he had all the courage to woo me very hard. He came after me very strong. That was remarkable. Is there something we can learn from Baba here?
Baba is a strong toaster too. Hey, Baba is complete, man.
Very romantic.
Just as an aside, can I quickly say, if you look in my profile picture now,
Olu,
there's a pic
your this is not coming up. Your sound. Just
now.
yeah, it's better.
Okay, just as an aside, um, I put up in my profile picture a picture of myself and HID Awolowo. It was taken in December 2012 on the 77th wedding anniversary of Awolowo and Mama. And yeah, I was glad I met her, and I'm glad I took this picture because I didn't want to take the picture. My dad wanted me to take it, but I declined. And Ambassador Dosumu said, "Why?" I said, "Because a lot of people come here to take pictures with you for political purposes, and they never do what Awolowo, they never do what he did. So I don't want to be one of those people." And she said, "No, no, no, no. Just come and sit down beside me and take the picture." So I'm glad I have a place to show off the picture today because I've always had it. But there it is in my profile. Yeah, thank you. I was glad I met her. Yeah.
Well done, man.
Wow, this is beautiful. Thank you so much, Mr. Olu. Mr. Bonka.
Yes, this is also what Mama HID said when he told her that he was interested in politics. She said, I did not like him entering politics because I loved him so much, but he was very insistent, so I had to agree. My initial objection was born out of my conviction that politics was unnatural, and a politician is like a pastor or a reverend gentleman. His whole life is public business interest, and his privacy is gone. To be a politician is sometimes to be a captive of public newspapers and also a farewell to ordinary existence. I was not brought up to live before the eyes of all. That was why I initially cautioned my husband not to go into politics. So this is just a woman that was very big on concentrating on her private life. And as we said in the private session, that was why all the ups and downs of Awolowo, when things were good, she was able to, Awolowo's life was a roller coaster. And we talked about how he went to London and came back. Then they became premier, and this woman blew out, became very rich, right? But he now went spiral again. He was in prison. Before that, in prison, he was embarrassed for over 2 years. They would tell him to go to house arrest at Ikene. They would place him under house arrest, and people would start visiting him there. And this woman will bring her friends together. They'll start cooking for the guests. We had a reading session on that on our last session. Then they decided that they didn't want him there, and then they took him to a place called Lekki. At that time, there was no road that went into Lekki. So that way, they felt like they would disconnect him with the people. And we talked about the house they put him there, the way it will rain and the water will pour to their feet and all that, and the way it was in tatters. The wife came with the friends and they built a makeshift house. They cut from palm trees and all that. So you see, this is a woman that could go from supporting her husband in England to becoming the first lady of the whole Western region to becoming the woman that is with her husband in exile. And throughout all that time, this woman never complained. Now, you would understand that it will be normal for a woman to kind of get angry and say, what is this now? What's your stubbornness? Why do you like this life they're giving us? Why don't you cooperate with the government? Because they gave Awolowo that option. Behave yourself. Come and join us. We will even give your people ministerial appointments, but stop being in the opposition. That's all they asked him. That he said no, that he's not agreeing. So normally you would expect even many of his followers turn their back on him, including what was that man that wrote the 1979 Constitution, their leader? Is it something Williams? Can somebody remind me who wrote the 1979 Constitution, the leader of that 40 people? I think it's
Richard Akinjide.
no.
Richard
It's not
Akinjide or
possible.
Rotimi Williams or
Rotimi
the
Williams. Rotimi
Rotimi
Williams.
Williams, yeah.
Yes, Rotimi Williams. So Rotimi Williams used to be one of his closest lieutenants. When Rotimi Williams walked away from him while he was incarcerated, that really broke Baba. So you'll see that even the closest people to him turned their back on him. His wife refused. She stood by him all through to the very end. Even in Calabar, after the opera got him a house, she went there to Calabar to be with him, and she was cooking for him, taking care of him. When campaign was going on, the UPGA rally between Opara and Awolowo's faction, she was there campaigning on the streets with him. And you just heard from her that she didn't like that life. She wanted to be a private person. But in support for her husband, all the sacrifices it required, she did everything she needed to do. That is the kind of woman that we all pray for in our life. And may God grant us that kind of woman. And may God make us as well a kind of man like Awolowo. Because, like our sister said, it's a two-way street, you know. But we can't talk about Awolowo's success without talking about the role the wife played. No, I want to go to his son's death. And I'm going to go into it later, but I just want to read about the situation of the death briefly and why I felt like a Jolawano. So on Thursday, July 11th of 1963, the West African pilot, I think this Shegun Awolowo that that died. I think his son is the one in government today, in
yes.
charge of the marketing board. Yes, okay. All right. Just wanted because he wasn't married when he died. That's why I was confused. But okay. So on Thursday, July 11, 1963, the West African pilot with its headline Our Son Died in a Car Crash. Once again, it was the West African pilot that did it. And guess what? The West African pilot was owned by Zeke. And Zeke was enjoying every bit of what was happening to Awolowo at that time. You know, they had this age old rivalry between themselves that started in the 40s. So we're talking of the 60s. So the bad blood between them had gone on for about 20 years by now. So West African Pilot was the one publishing all the unfortunate details of what was happening to Awolowo. So he said on Thursday, July 11, 1963, the West African pilot had its headline that our son died in a car crash. He was traveling to Lagos to see his dad. Announced the death of barrister Shegun Awolowo, who died at Ibadan on July 10, 1963. Awo's eldest son, he was 25. He was rushed to Adeoye Hospital shortly after the crash. Shegun was said to be traveling to Ijebu on his way to Lagos to see his father in prison. At the village of Abanla, 30 miles from Ibadan, his car was involved in a collision. His driver instantly gave up the ghost. Shegun was rushed unconscious to the hospital. The doctor battled for 3 hours to save his life. At about 10 a.m., July 10, 1963, he gave up the ghost. Shegun read law at Cambridge University and was called to the bar in 1962. He returned to Nigeria in August 1962 to assist his father during the Justice G.B. Coker's commission into the financial affairs of 6 statutory corporations in western Nigeria. Although Awo received more than 500 condolences, Shegun's death did not come without reactions. On Friday, July 19, 1963, the West African pilot ran an editorial titled We Bad Samaritans. So this title was talking, the We Bad Samaritans was talking about, the story of the Good Samaritan, where where people were passing by a sick person, and until the Samaritan saw it. That's what the analogy was about. First of all, the car that collided into Shegun's car, nobody spoke about it again. It just disappeared from the narration. And then he was there for a long time. Nobody attended to him before they now took him to a hospital. And then three hours later, they said he died, which was strange. So that was what they were talking about. And so they said it was written by Dr. Tai Sholari, who argued that Shegun's death was partially caused by Nigerians' carefree attitude towards accident victims. A lot of vehicles must have driven past during the 100 precious minutes. Some say it was about 1 hour 30 minutes before someone came to rescue him. For that hour of the day around 9 a.m., there must have been a car or lorry or anything on four wheels after at least every 2 minutes. So it was strange that nobody was able to reach out to him on time. So Jonathan Unwosu, I'm sure we remember him. He was a powerful stalwart from the eastern region. He wrote a poem in honor of Segun Awolowo and on his to solicit with the father about the death of his son. So we're going to get to what led to the inquiry and Awolowo's Judas. The person that they believe that he was paid to testify against Awolowo. So Western region remembers him as Judas. No, we will get there. But we want to talk about Awo's achievements in summary now, since we've been talking about it for a while. And then I'm going to be reading from page 29 of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, another book, but so it says major achievements of Action Group. Awo was one of the early trained, nurtured, and educated shepherds that Nigeria never had as a president. He was too prepared for the post. He was so intelligent that even his contemporaries at the time feared and respected his sense of thought, direction, competence, and foresight. He was a great forecaster, or what some people would call a prophet. He saw today from yesterday, and he saw tomorrow from today. At the beginning of his career in government, Chief Awolowo quickly reformed the local government system. Then he introduced and successfully implemented the first free primary education program in Africa, introduced and successfully managed first free medical service program in Nigeria for children up to the age of 18, established the first television station in Africa, built Liberty Stadium, the first such modern sports facility in Nigeria, introduced and successfully implemented the first minimum wage policy in Nigeria, and actually paid Western Nigerians from October 1954 a minimum wage that was double the amount paid to workers of the same level in any part of Africa. So the party sponsored the 1953 motion for independence. Uh, They created various farm institutes in rural areas of Western region, such as farm institutes to develop and generate employment for masses. They created the Western Nigerian Development Corporation, which we spoke about earlier, and the Western Nigerian Development Corporation established the following: various plantations covering 26,774 acres. This included the Apoja oil palm, Shagamu rubber estate, and cattle ranch at Upper Ogun, which covered 26,170 acres. So we had our own local ruga. What happened to it? Wow. So then there was a rubber processing factory at Benin, a fruit canning factory at Ibadan, um, a lot of hotels, including Premier Hotel and Lafayette Rest House at Ibadan. Then they created the West African Portland Cement. Excuse me. 350-acre Bodija housing estate with 173 houses under construction in 1959. 750-acre Ikeja housing industrial estate, out of which housing got 550 acres and 200 acres went into making of an industrial estate. They created a lot of trading companies, including National Bank of Nigeria, which created soft loans for industrialists and farmers. Nigerian General Insurance Corporation Limited, which insured the farm products and industrial estates. Grail, Etroven and Company, Cooperative Bank. So he increased the population of primary school pupils from 42,000 in 1953 to 1,037,000 in 1959. The, the enrollment increased by 77.7%. Created the Western Nigerian television in 1959. As an agriculturalist, rounding up, Awolowo established many agricultural development and finance corporations, including the farm settlements across Western region. He set up plantations in this settlement for oil palm, cocoa, rubber, and citrus. He also gave advances to farmers to increase their productivity. He made loans of 5 to 50 pounds to cash crops farmers to boost farm products for export. He also gave the sum of £250,000 to the region's Cooperative Suppliers Association for the purchase of 7,000 sets of spraying equipment for cocoa farmers. Wow. Has anybody ever beat that? That's his legacy. The floor is open.
Yeah, I have a question, and I want you to buttress on this. I wish this is here, right? At the time when Baba Awolowo was doing this, right? If we can buttress on how the revenue generation is.
Sorry, Jibaba, Otuma, can you ping him in?
Sorry?
Can you ping D in?
Okay, okay.
I'm sure he would have done a very beautiful justice on this economic aspect.
All right, all right.
Be- Because it's important to talk about how, because at that time, remember, Nigeria was actually a country that is already in existence, so it will be very high opening if we can see how that revenue was generated under that constitution, what rights has this region and the state in which these produces are generated. Because we can have a very good analysis and comparison and what we have done differently from then and how we went from being that great to what we had today.
All right. Thank you so much, Jibaba. Mr. Kemi, do you have something to say? I'm going to
Yeah,
try.
I
I'm
quickly
going.
want to
Yeah,
chip in
I'm going to.
something.
I'm trying to reach out to D. Mr. Kemi, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Otumba. Mr. Gunka, thank you for the job well done. May Olodumare continue to give you more wisdom. I was on Facebook, that was this morning, and I heard what this guy said, Sheon Kuti. Though I have respect for him as a person, but at the same time, I do have problem with some of his submission. So the someone I think it was at a program where he said people are talking of corruption. What about the corruption in the regional government in Nigeria? And he mentioned Awolowo, that Awolowo did everything he did just because he wanted to be president. And I got so angry. And I looked at him like, why is it that some of people reason, and I mean, in this manner? I think the politicians that we have these days could do half of what this great man did, this Orisha. What he did during his lifetime and during his tenure as a prime minister. If the politicians of these days could do half or even 1/4 of what he did, would Nigeria be in chaos today? Will Nigeria be will it be in shambolic situation that it is today? So sometimes when people come up with this argument, I begin to ask my question: where are these people getting their stories? Where are they getting the stories? If this guy could do as much as he did back then, what about these days? when he has the technology and everything that he has at his, that the politicians of today, what they have at their disposal, he doesn't even have, let me say, 1/10, because even the education then wasn't at this. Because every home in the southwest, we know we always provide one or two graduates. Most of these resources were not there, and he was able to achieve this much. And the politicians of today, or the politician sympathizer, will still come and still be saying nonsense. Please, whenever we see some of these stories, I think we should try as much as possible to put it straight to them and recount his sources when he was the prime minister of the western region. Because you're coming to tell me that it's because he wanted to be president. That's why he did all that. How can somebody be that myopic? If Buhari in his first regime could do half of what of what he did, and now that he has everything in his disposal, every resource at his disposal, will Nigeria be in chaos as it is? Or the so-called Jagaban, when he was the governor, what are the things that he even did apart from amassing wealth to himself? What are the wealth that some people can actually point out to that this great man amassed to himself? So we never had things of that, and we still have some people still coming and still be spitting out jargons all around. I think, to my own opinion, wherever he is, I still give him a very big kudos, and I say may Lord tomorrow continue to bless him, even despite the fact that he is not even in our midst again. Mr. Gbonka, thank you for the job well done. I yield the mic.
Yes, thank you. So I want us to know that Awolowo actually did not start out as a politician. Awolowo set out to unite his people. And I also want us to understand that looking at his history from the previous session and now, you will see that he operated on a certain level of principles that he never compromised. And three, there was a time he was finance minister. Now, he was dealing with someone that was not as in, nobody questioned whatever he did. He single-handedly created the currency for the country. Nobody knew how he did it. That's one of his ingenuity. In the midst of a war, he created a new currency, developed it to be very powerful, and still financed the whole war without the country going into debt. He could have he could have helped himself to all the money in this world in that process. But guess what this man did? Out of principle, when after the war was over, Gowon wanted to set himself up as president for life. So he started doing what you call a military civilian kind of government. He started trying to organize that they will vote for elections in the states, in the Senate, but he would remain the president and he would run it with soldiers at the center. So that was what he was trying to do. And that was one of the reasons Awolowo resigned from his government. And one of the things that made Gowon's government very unpopular was Awolowo's rhetorics. He was going around making speeches that no. The worst, what he said was that the worst civilian president is better than the best military president. I'm not sure if he will still have that view today, if he sees what Buhari is doing, though. But, but that was his view then. And that was one reason why immediately Muritala became president. Muritala was desperate to have Awolowo be to be in his cabinet, especially in his constitutional draft committee. That was the first thing he did. Because he knows that if Awolowo starts to make rhetorics against him, his days will be numbered too. And of course, Awolowo rejected it because, like I said, Rotimi Williams had betrayed Awolowo before, and Awolowo was angry on two things. How do you want me to be part of a constitutional drafting committee? And you just announce it on the phone without consulting with me first. And why would I be a part of a constitutional committee where Rotimi Williams is the head, and now I'm now part of the member? That's a big insult on Awolowo. That was the boy that he literally groomed and trained. You know, it was under his wings that he nurtured him to be a politician. Now you want him to be the head of a constitutional draft committee where Awolowo would now be reporting to him. You know, so those were part of the things that make Awolowo reject it. And he said, you know what, you have no choice. Because when you are called to serve your country, you don't have that choice. That was what Murtala told him. And he said he gave him certain time to reconsider, or there's going to be trouble between him and Awolowo. Well, he didn't. The between that time, the coup happened and it killed Murtala. So you can see all the principles that this man operated with. But I want to tell you guys something for a fact. Um, the Kuti family has never liked Awolowo. It's not just his son. It's been since the days of his grandmother, Fumilayo Ransom Kuti. You would remember that when they broke away to form AG, Fumilayo did not break away with them. She remained with Zik. She remained in NCNC. Now, the Kuti family are not pro-Yoruba like you think. They don't have that Yoruba DNA, Yoruba identity, love for Yoruba as a concept, the way you and I do, because there are sorrows with respect to not all sorrows, because Bode Thomas was a sorrow, and Bode Thomas was an avowed, unrepentant Yoruba man. So I'm not saying that all sorrows are like that, but there are some that have gone so far in their concept of Western perception that they believe that Western philosophies must always override African philosophies. So the Kutis are one of such families. The Shoyinka is not like that. It's a different brand. He's also a Saro as well. So you can see that it's something that has been happening. His father started a political party then, Movement of the People. So, and that was when they carried that coffin to go to the front of the damn barracks. And Obasanjo asked Vatsa to go out and go and kill Fela. And he was doing that in protest to what they did to his mother. But when he started that political party, he wanted to have a Pan-Africanist mindset. He was trying to build it on the blueprint of Kwame Nkrumah. And one of the obstacles to him at that time, apart from an MQ that the government used to destroy his financial source, he started a newspaper called Yap Them. So they thought it was a joke, but in no time, 15 states, he had a presence there, and the movement of the people became so powerful that every time he came out to speak, that was when you started seeing fella with pictures holding two hands up in a fist. So every time he came out to speak at that time, a big crowd was always following him. So that made the government very uncomfortable. And they now asked MQ Abiola to help them destroy his financial base because most of his record labels, he was doing it under Decca Records, and Decca Records belonged to MQ Abiola. So that was how they destroyed him financially and destroyed his ability to be able to finance and run the party. If not, he could have become a thorn. But one of his obstacles at that time also was Awolowo, because at the time Awolowo was alive, nobody can wrestle leadership of Yoruba people with him. So these are the layers of everything going on at that time that that the son is reflecting and talking about. They don't speak from a Yoruba person's perspective. They are speaking from a Pan-Africanist pers- perspective. So I see people like him, they deserve sympathy rather than anger. I don't waste my energy on someone like Sheil. Being Fela's son or being Ransom Kuti's son does not translate to common sense. I think that's the mistake we make as Yoruba people sometimes. We overrate people. Who is Sheil? He's just the son of some singer somewhere, some of the singer activists. Does that make him smarter than you and I? Or does that mean he has
Bonka,
what
could I
it is?
ask you a question?
Yes,
Couldn't, rather than this being about an ideology or sorrow, couldn't you just be that Shehu is ignorant? Because people, seriously, the fact that someone is at an elevated level doesn't mean that the person is actually conscious or intelligent.
exactly. I totally agree. I've listened to him, and I mean, he's an interesting character. That's all I will say. I know some of his friends are here. I know. I don't want to mention them, but I know someone on stage that really stands up for Shell. So let me let me stop it here.
So, Gonka, I just wanted to clarify to those that are listening. When Gonka talk about the Saros, right? The history of the Saros goes to when the Americans are returning back to Africa. They actually settled in Sierra Leone and somehow find their way back to Lagos. And I think the Agudas are mostly tied to the Brazilian. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, yes.
All right. So, do we have anyone else on the stage who would like to say one or two things before we go back? Uh, please flash your mic if you do. Yoruba Goddess, please go ahead.
Thank you. And I hope you can hear me because it says my network is poor. Um,
Yes, go
I
ahead.
just
Yeah.
perfect. So I've missed majority of the submission, unfortunately, but I'll listen more on the replay. I wanted to know more about Awolowo and Akintola's falling out. And I don't know if you guys have covered it, but if you haven't and you can give me an overview, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, we covered it in the previous session, but to just make it briefly, when Akintola came back to power, there are two things going on. There is an Oyo Ijebu rivalry. There is an old one, and October was the previous one recorded.
Unfortunately, no.
Oh, yeah. There was a there was an age-long rivalry between Oyo and Ijebu, and that went as far as during the days of the civil war in Yoruba land. There was a king at Ijebu then. His name was Awujale Afidipote. So he did a blockade to block Arelatosa from having access to guns and all the things he needs to fight his campaign. And that greatly messed up his war campaigns at that time. So it was a big economic blockade, and it will actually end up creating an economic crisis in Ijebu. And Awujale Afidipote did not care. So this thing really hurt Ibadan people so much. And as at that time of the 1940s, 1950s, the memory was still fresh. So we're talking of something that happened in the late 1800s. So we're talking of about 40, 50 years apart. So the a lot of headache came from the Oyo and Ibadan axis against Awolowo's leadership because of his Ijebu leanings, because he was from Ijebu. Now, it's so interesting that most of the landmarks that you see Awolowo did, he did it in Ibadan. So you notice that he's very detribalized. Also, the Oba that he gave the maximum respect to is the Oni of Ife, not his own Awujale. So you can see also that he was very big on the Yoruba identity, and he was going to do it the right way that it was put in place by Oduduwa, right? So these were all the things that he was doing, but I think that bad blood was so big and Ibadan and Oyo by extension felt like they're not ready to let go. And that's why you see that the first person to antagonize him was the Alafia of Oyo. So now Oyo is the majority of Yoruba people. I think the Oyo ethnic stock among the Yoruba people, the Oyo tribal stock among the Yoruba ethnic people is more than half of the whole Yoruba by extension when you talk of Ibadan and all of them. So Oyo and your Ibadan faction is very, very important if Awolowo was going to be very successful politically. Now, the person that was supporting him then, that made it easy, was Bode Thomas, and we've read about him. But unfortunately, Bode Thomas died. And that really put Awolowo in disarray because that now led to the emergence of Akintola. And Akintola was a big, big, big mistake. So there was another guy in Ibadan and his name was Adelabu Penkelemes. He also used that rhetoric. In fact, he started a movement called Mabolaje. And that Mabolaje means, why do you let an Ijebu person come to Ibadan to now dominate Ibadan situation? That was, he felt that that was an insult, looking at all the things that happened in the past. So that was when this song, I don't know if people know this song. If you are from Ibadan, you will know it. It goes like this. Nìbàdàn ni wọ́n bí wa sí, bàbá wa, bàbá wa tiwa, bàbá wa táwa lọ nílẹ̀. Can somebody help me, please? Nobody knows that song.
You will pay me.
We know it, but you have to sing it by fire by force.
Bàbá wa àti àwa ló nílẹ̀, pẹ̀lú àwa ló nílẹ̀, Nìbàdàn ni wọ́n bí wa sí. It was the Jebu people that were singing that song to tell the Ibadan people that we also have rights to Ibadan the same way you do. So, not yeah, Jibaba, go on.
So, Gunka, I want to take advantage of this moment to actually speak to the audience on the difference between being for Yoruba nation and being a tribalist. If you listen to Gunka very well, he said Oyo is a tribe, Ijebu is a tribe, Awori is a tribe, but Yoruba is actually a nation. For those of you that have been accusing those people that support Yoruba nation as being tribalists, the good news is this: we have Igbo's brother here and our Igbo sisters. We absolutely have no problem with ethnic nations, indigenous nations. Yes, there might be differences within the nations amongst the tribe, but Yoruba nation is a country of its own. And that being said, that country was destroyed before Nigeria was created. So we are not talking about starting a tribal, what have you here. We're talking about a nation that already existed, that predates the country you also stand up for today, which is Nigeria, and also is a combination of many tribes. I just wanted to clarify that.
All right, thank you so much. Let me quickly play a choir rendition of the song Nìbàdàn ni wọ́n bí wa sí, just for a minute.
Hey, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Gonka, you can go ahead.
And Duncan was expelled from the choir yesterday.
Bonka no singing again. No.
Well, I'm very terrible. Forgive me.
Okay, please quickly, can I ask? You mentioned something about D expounding on the financial aspects of how Awolowo raised revenue via taxes and how they used it.
Yes, D is going to come back in a little bit. He was here, he had to step out, but he's going to come back. Don't worry, we're going to have that captured. Mr. Ola, I saw you flashed your mic.
Thank you. So I've been following this room and Yoruba Nation, yeah, for quite a while now. This is the first time I'm ever speaking. I have a question, and my question is like this: I live in Germany, and in Germany there are a lot of Turkish and Arab people. And I observe that when you are with them, I work with them and I see them and hang out with them a lot. In their groups, they are very structured, as in you can identify like a leadership structure within them. And the ones that seems to be the followers or the members, they all follow that leadership. But yet, the black people, they are not like that. We struggle and strive with each other a lot. So I am for Yoruba nation, but my question is going forward, what is the solution to that, to this striving? I don't know, among black people, or let me say Yoruba people. Now, let me just say Yoruba people. What do you think?
Let me give a very ignorant response to that before that is thoroughly dealt with, right? So, asking for Yoruba nation is not about division. In fact, we have, if you have come to the Rubicon room, so that is the alliance between the Yoruba and the Igbos, right? Say, for example, we get our
Not
nation.
not the Igbos alone.
No, and the other nations, I won't call them, So assuming in your line, right? Look at Europe that you just talked about, right? So you can see the Germans, right? They are an independent nation of their own within a very small space. Likewise are the French people. We have the British, and we have the Polish, right? Each of them are a very tiny sect, but a very strong nation of their own. So that being said, say peradventure tomorrow we get a Yoruba nation, we will actually be stronger together in unity, negotiating with this other nation. And if those nations are prosperous in their own, that will actually foster the unity of the African nation, a continent. And in fact, it might even be a very strong argument for the Pan Africanists. The reason why we are as divisive as we are right now is there's something called divide and conquer or divide and rule. And that divide and rule is actually what makes us look like we are so disunited. However, if we operate in a natural state, which like I'm a scientist, right? If you take any element, right, and you put them outside, everything turns to its natural state, which is like it turns to its basic form. In that form, we're going to prosper and we're going to negotiate. But at this particular state that we are in, it's a survival state, is a survival of the fittest. You're going to see all this division continue. And I think more justice will be done. I just wanted to add that little caveat.
No, thank you for that. I don't know if anyone else would like to respond to that question. Oloyo Lukotun.
Our
Baba,
our Pharaoh brother.
mo kí gbogbo ilé o.
Gbogbo Leki o,
Mo ń
Baba.
mo ń gbádùn ètò lọ.
Good. So, G Baba already mentioned one of the key reasons why we would have strife amongst ourselves. But I'm going to put the bunch of the work on ourselves, who are the followers. We need to learn from history, and it is very, very important that we do so. We need to recognize very, very quickly the people that exhibit traits, characteristics of what you want or of what you desire in a leader. And when you recognize that, that is the person that you need to work with. Whether that person is your king or your local government chairman or your state governor, you need to rise above petty sentiments.
Because I can tell you that Akintola had followers too. So it is important that we begin to recognize people amongst us that we can work with, that we can start to engage and encourage and deliberate with. That person may not be popular, and that's fine. And that person may eventually not be our leader. But you, like Mr. Olu have been saying all along, you would now recognize your role, the role that you need to play in history, because you are following and you are supporting the right kind of leadership that you think as a people we deserve. Don't let us wait for one Messiah that is going to come in the name of Jesus Christ or in the name of Oduduwa, that we are going to call an Oduduwa reincarnation. It's not going to happen. But when you start to see people really exhibit, that person may not be in, you may not agree with that individual 100%. And, with Awolowo, when Bonka would describe him, he would say he is an Awoist, but there are still some questions around the personality of this man, about some of the decisions that this man made. Bonka would question that, even though Bonka follows this man to the letter. But he still always have questions about why, for example, he would work with Gowan. And he would also say, well, maybe because Gowan is not a Fulani man, Gowan is from the Middle Belt. But why then would you work with Gowan against your fellow Southern brothers? That is a question that Bonka has always expressed to be puzzling to him. But that does not mean that Bonka is not an Hawoist. So you can have questions around an individual, but you need to look at the bigger picture to understand how this individual is pushing those principles that would move us forward as a Yoruba people. And that is my response. It's a challenge to the followership to recognize. And to do that, you need knowledge, learnings. I don't know if anyone else has got anything to share.
Otiba, I
That's
want to
Larry.
say something.
Yes,
Yeah.
just a quick short thing to say in response to the last question. I one thing I've noticed among these, how do you say, these other nations is that when they're out of their national space, they very, very much band together. This was something that about a decade ago, or an Irish friend of mine told me that one of the reasons he sees that black people are usually how do you say are usually how do you say, put down in all these other societies is that in spite of what we face in outside of our natural, how do you say, or our home environment, that we're very much individualistic. We very much strive to survive and survive quite well, no matter where we are. Like, you go anywhere, China, despite the racism and the discrimination, we still manage to survive. So, and that point kind of sank home with me because as most sub-Saharan Black cultures, whenever I go to a country or whenever I've lived in a country, it's not really, you don't see this kind of hierarchical structure within, or like we pull together as a group. Everybody is kind of striving to make their own way in life without much support from them, from much of their community. Uh, for most of the time. So I think I know personally, like even within in their own country, within their own countries, that these kind of things are not like that as you see outside the country. So, for instance, I know there are scruples with, for instance, the Kurds in the Turkish Iranian area. You always hear it when you talk to them about what life is back home. But when they are in Western lands or in a foreign country, they always seem to band together. As in, I'll give you an example. I had a Pakistani friend who moved to where I am right now in Sweden, and on the day he arrived knowing no one, nobody. And he said he just met another Pakistani guy on the street and asked him, "Hey, listen, I've just entered the country, blah blah blah." um, what, how can I survive here? And the guy took him to a place where he could get food cheap, found somebody to house him until he stood on his own 2 feet. I have never heard that from a sub-Saharan, like from any of the sub-Saharan African cultures I've seen here. So yes, they do tend to band together for each other because they understand that they need to survive in this land and that these people won't give them anything. But on our side, I tend to see, I it's not that I would help any, sub-Saharan African person, but generally, I never hear that story from any of our cultures. So I think it's a case of like they understand that they're in they are in Europe and that these people will not make it easy for them. So they band together to make life easier for themselves. Whereas I cannot really say the same for our side of things. Thanks.
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
yeah,
Dan Larry, go ahead. Yes.
yeah. I just picked some statements out of what Mr. Oladid asked. They've been saying, "How do you achieve your Yoruba nation? Your Yoruba nation?" I just want everybody to let us actually correct this. It's not your Yoruba nation. It's our Yoruba nation, because every hand are needed on the table right now. Every strategy are welcome. It belongs to everybody, not just some set of people. So let us change correct that narrative of your Yoruba nation. It's our Yoruba nation. We all are Yoruba. So it belongs to every one of us. Yeah. So I just want to correct that, though.
That's very important. Thank you so much, my brother. Okay, let's go back. Mr. Bonka, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. I think it's Fumi around or Fumi left.
I
Oh,
think she left.
yeah,
Yes.
she left. Okay. So, well, Akintola, what I would say happened was Akintola had what you call a clash of ego. We spoke about it previously. It didn't start out like that. Akintola was actually very respectful at the start. And in fact, you see, on the Independence Day, he was in the front row. They didn't put Awolowo in the front row. And when he saw Awolowo, he rushed to him and was going to leave his seat for Awolowo to come sit down. But Awolowo said, no, 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 don't worry. They were on that VIP lounge area. The problem started with his wife. Let me read some things from Awol's book, another book, Travels of Democracy. Because we dealt with this extensively in the previous session, I won't go too deep in it. But I will just read four um, excerpts here, just so that we can get a clean understanding of what was going on. Let me start from page 16. Hold on. Okay. 1 minute, please.
All right.
So,
Thank you so much. Okay.
oh,
Before you,
okay.
please,
Yes.
before you continue, Mr. Bonka. So now we have D back on stage. Welcome, Mr. D, from your short leave. So the question I've been asked about how Awolowo was able to raise funds to fund some of the projects that he implemented. So after Bonka, maybe you can shed some light to that. Mr. Bonka, please go ahead.
Yes. So, D, just in perspective, we read about many of the things that Awolowo did at his time, which included like the various acres that he said, the palm oil, the rubber estates, the fruit canning factory, the Portland cement, the construction projects he embarked on. So we would like you to give us an economic perspective of how he did it and how the projects evolved when the time comes. Thanks for joining the stage.
No problem. Thank you. I'll work on that.
Yes, yes. So so in reading this is what Awolowo said. He said, so this was the Independence Day, right? He turned to my wife. Okay, so he said, on seeing Sir Abubakar coming towards us, I nudged my wife. We rose and went out. Okay, so let me start from So let me give a background of what was happening.
Now you have a very muffled
You're
audio.
echoing.
Can you hear me better?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. So what happened there was that it was Independence Day, and all the founding fathers were on the VIP lounge, but nobody put Awolowo on the VIP lounge. So when he got there with his wife, he had to now go into the crowd, and that was the doing of Amadu Bello, because he was upset that Awolowo refused to form coalition. But Abubakar was still trying to woo Awolowo. He didn't want Awolowo to be opposition because of the love the Middle Belt had for him. So he felt like if Awolowo was in the opposition, he would break the knot, which is something he was desperate to do. And allow the Middle Belt would go with him, and that's dangerous for them. So he said, so we got there, and we went into the crowd. Okay, they went into the crowd and they sat around the crowd. Then someone told Tafawa Balewa that Awolowo was around and he was in the crowd. So Awolowo was now narrating it from page 15. He said, after some 2 or more minutes, the light landed on my face. The police outrider moved quickly towards us. He informed us that the Prime Minister has been looking for us and wanted us to come out of the crowd. I was reluctant to leave where I was. It was enough for my wife and myself, no matter where we sat, to see the Union Jack lowered and the Nigerian flag raised aloft in its place forever. That was what great contemporary nationalists and patriots like Ernest Ikoli, Zeke, Ojike, and my humble self, to mention a few, had for many years fought for. However, on seeing Sir Abubakar coming towards me, I nudged my wife, and we rose and went out to the dark pavilion to meet him. Chief, what are you doing in this place? Abubakar asked in surprise. He was quite affable and added, you don't belong here. He then turns to my wife. Ah, good evening, Chief Mrs. Awolowo. I am sorry about this. Chief shouldn't have taken you to that place, but that is where the invitation you sent me places us, said Awolowo. I didn't choose this place. Where is the invitation card? He asked. Here it is. He took it, looked at it, and he was sorry and put it in his pocket. He remarked at the same time that someone had made a grave mistake and that he would look into the matter. We were taken to the place where the Prime Minister, the premiers, and the federal ministers had sat. The ambassadors were seated behind them. Chief Akintola, on seeing me, got up and offered his place to me. I declined the offer. For if I was expected in the front row, places would have been reserved for me and my wife. So, as you can see here, as at that time, Makitola still respected him enough to a point that if he sees him, he will acknowledge him as his leader. So, where did this problem come from? Does anybody remember the story of the Bible where Saul and David killed a giant? When they came back to the city, Saul and David were in good terms. Then some people, I don't know who they were, but they started singing and they started praising David and they started belittling Saul. That was where the hatred for Saul started from. The Bible readers here will know the story I'm saying, but that is how it can be sometimes when Ah, let me stop before I get in trouble. But page 113 of the same biography. So, so SL, I have had my distrust for Akintola ever since his days as AG opposition leader in the House of Representatives um in in opposition in the House of Representatives in 1954. He developed some unhealthy association with the Sardauna and MPC leaders. Akintola spoke Hausa fluently. He had Hausa blood in his DNA. Also, ad nauseam, he never tired in private conversations of condemning the Igbo in the most derisive language, extolling the Hausa Fulani in the most eulogistic terms, and emphasizing the old friendship that existed between Hausa and Fulani, that existed between Hausa Fulani and Yoruba people. Please, so I'm a historian. I don't know this age-long friendship. Oh. What I know is that they wanted to conquer us. So I don't know if that's the definition of friendship. But Awolowo said that was how Akintola thought. So let me read that again. He spoke Hausa fluently and had Hausa blood in his veins. Almost ad nauseam, he never tired in private conversations of condemning the Igbo in the most derisive language and extolling the Hausa Fulani in the most eulogistic terms, emphasizing the age-old intercourse which existed between the Hausa Fulani and Yoruba, as well as the strong similarity observable in their cultures. During 1959 election, he was put in charge of general surveillance of our activities in the north. He failed to discharge his assignment and evaded every occasion for giving me or the party a report of his activities or lack of them. So before Awolowo started campaigning in the north, the person that was supposed to be doing it was Akintola because he spoke Hausa well. But he refused to do it because he didn't want to ruffle feathers with the feudal system of the north. He preferred that Awolowo should form a coalition with them. So you can see how the North was very eager to use Akintola to destroy from within because he had great sympathy towards them. And we discussed all of this in the previous message. So I'm going to read two more excerpts from this and then we will move on from there. So I'm reading from page 69. It says, at some point after his appointment as premier of, so I want to talk about where the rivalry started from. Where Awolowo and Akintola's feuds started from, and then we are going to go to the roles their wives played. So he said, at some point, after his appointment as Premier of the Western Region in December of 1959, Akintola developed the ambition to become leader of the AG as well as to be Premier. When I was in Western Region, I was both leader of the party and Premier of the region. Immediately after he assumed office, there were strong but not directly confirmed reports of utterances from him which were critical of and derogatory to me. I was not in any doubt that SLA was capable of any kind of perfidy, but I preferred to wait and see. The first authentic indication and report came on the 3rd of April 1960 when Shikiru Adetono was installed as the Awujale of Ijebu-Ode. Before that date, it had been the practice of AG supporters to shout Awo, Awo on seeing me. Now they shouted Awo SLA on seeing SLA alone or in any company. So what you're saying is that when they see SLA, Akitola, they will still shout Awo and then they will shout SLA. But when they say Awo, they shout Awo, but they don't shout SLA. This is where the complex and trouble started from. So it was a very huge crowd on the Toro grounds, Ijebu-Ode, where the installation was performed. On SLA's arrival and departure, the crowd shouted only Awo during the ceremony. It was a continuous shout of Kabiesi interspersed with Awo. It was the second time, to my knowledge, when SLA's presence was so patently ignored by AG supporters and admirers. The first time was at Ikorodu. So now, so goes the story. When SLA and his wife left that day, his wife complained bitterly about the behavior of the crowd. She said they were mannerless and disrespectful. They knew that her husband was the premier and that he was in sole charge of the occasion. Why then were they so thoughtless and rude as to be shouting Awo instead of SLA? This kind of unseemly behavior must stop, and he must do something about it, she said. In response, SLA said that the crowd were extremely disrespectful. They had treated him with contempt by shouting Awo instead of SLA. That was not the first time this kind of thing had happened since he became premier. Indeed, he was determined to do something about it without further delay. And then he assured his wife, he said, "Give me 6 months, and no one will hear the shout of Awo in this region again." And the wife promptly commented, "That is how it should be." So let me read this chapter again to show another reservation I had of Awo. He said, "I was very reluctant to recommend SLA as my successor in the Western region. I had two main reasons for my reluctance. Firstly, I was of the consideration opinion that he completely lacked all the attributes for such a high office. He does not have the industry, mental, application, competence, discipline, and honesty that I expect in someone in that position. Secondly, I conscientiously thought there were more suitable people in the cabinet, which I headed. As one-time chairman of the Western Nigerian Finance Corporation, a post to which he was appointed in 1955, SLA was an unmitigated failure. Everything he was appointed to, including sole commissioner to inquire into the remunerations of chiefs, he did nothing. So I just put in all this. I don't want to keep reading and reading and reading because we dealt with this already extensively. But he did not like Akintola and he didn't want him to succeed him. But people, like I said before, Oyo was big in numbers, and it's very hard. Let me be careful how I'm going to put this. Okay, let me skip that word so that I don't offend any tribal group within the context. But now,
So,
people were telling,
Bunker,
yes,
I think don't skip it. Just put it in context, and always. So I like how you used to couch it with, "We just had a 100-year civil war," so people will understand.
yes. So, or your people, hmm, leadership in Yoruba nation, it will be hard for an Oyo man. Let me skip it, Bo. Please, let me skip it. I know my reasons. Yeah.
Skipped,
So yeah,
skipped, Bronca, skipped.
yeah, yeah. Let me skip it. Okay. So now they were telling Awolowo that, listen, this was shortly after the death of Adelabu Penkelemes, and they were they were angry. Oh, okay. This was this was at the death of Adelabu Penkelemes, and they were angry with Ijebu people because they thought that Awolowo played a role in his death because he died in a motor accident. So now, two things have happened. The Alaafin of Oyo has been removed, Penkelemes. So they were like, if he did not give power to Akintola, it will look like he's coming after Oyo people. So that was what made him do what he did. But it backfired in a very, very, very interesting way. So that's what I thought to share. So I'm going to yield. It seems we are going to have a part three because we didn't get to. I wanted to read about his prison trials, how they manipulated that prison case to make sure he was put in jail. And then I wanted to talk about the tensions that happened between Akitala's wife and Awolowo's wife. That was another interesting episode. But I'm not sure if we are going to be able to get to it today. So maybe we would have to do a part three. But I'm yielding back to Otumba.
Yes, Otumba is currently on break right now. But I want to ask if D is ready. And the question that was asked before D came was Bunka was talking about all the economic excellence that Awolowo was able to achieve within the framework of Nigeria. And the question is, under that circumstance, at that time, how was he able to achieve those things? What was the nature of the constitution? What was the sharing formula like? And what has changed from then till now? Why are the people today in the Southwest struggling to replicate such economic achievement? I don't know if you are ready, D, to go into that so you can walk us through it.
Yes, I'm trying to see if I can send a link to an article to ping it in. So that way, because we're going to be reading from a particular book, and I sometimes, these things, so that there's no argument, so that people can always, fact check and all of that. It's always better for everybody to have a copy of the book, and then we can just read together from the page, and then I'll walk you through the economic situation of the Western region. And more importantly, you would know exactly how much it was almost like bringing in for all the like few years, right, up until even 1960. And then more importantly, you begin to see, I will talk about some of the exploits, like how we use the money, and of course the implications for that in terms of trade. But so that's what I'm trying to do. To just take about maybe 3 more minutes. I just want to pin the article on the profile, and then we can continue. Like I said, what we're going to do again is to look at like an economic perspective. Just we'll look at the revenue. More importantly, we'll look at all the money that was earned in the Western region. What was the amount, compared to all the other regions as well. Then we'll talk about maybe briefly um, some of the productions that was happening at that time, especially in the Western region, and how Awolowo took advantage of the revenue to create margin factories, plastics factories, how he was trying to just industrialize rapidly, right, in a bid towards to create some sort of revenue. We talk about soap production, we'll talk about just cigarettes, generally things that contributed vastly to the GDP of not just the Western region, but also of Nigeria at that time. We would also talk about just the little cement factories in the Western region at that time. So I don't know if it's okay. I'm going to try and pin the article, the book. It's a book I go to from at least once a week or once a month, depending. It's Olufemi Ekundare, An Economic History of Nigeria, from 1860 to 1960. So more importantly, we'll focus on the revenues of all the regions, and then more importantly, we'll talk about the Western region. So just give me a minute. Let me try and see if I can pin it, and then we'll continue from there. In the meantime, we
So,
can take one submission.
so before they pins that thing, on there is actually the YouTube live. This is streamed live on YouTube. So for those of you listening, before that links go down, can you copy that link, share with your friends, your enemies, even share with the Fulanis? We give you the permission, and everybody you know of, share with them and let them make their comment, because it's very important for Nigerians. I mean, all Nigerians right now to understand some of these details. So they will be taking that link down, but please copy it and share it, stream it, share it on your Twitter, on your Facebook, because this information here, we thank Bonka D. Otumba for putting this session together. This, until I came here to Clubhouse, I've been struggling to get some of this information. And even when I do get it, I get too busy. So these gentlemen have actually devoted their life to spend time on reading these things, and they are sharing it with us for free. And please, do not take it for granted. This is actually what we can do to build the nation. For those of you asking, what's the way forward? What we are learning here, we are intentionally learning the details of how these people did it, because if they could do it, and with Facebook, with Twitter, with all this advanced technology we have today, I think we should learn from what our ancestors did and do better than they did. And if, except we all are very much aware and educated of what has befallen us before, we won't know how to navigate away. So they will be taking that link down any moment from now. Please, if you haven't copied that YouTube live, please copy it. We'll bring it back again, and I will open the floor for one or two submission before we go into the economic perspective, while Bunka takes a little break. If anybody wants to talk, can you place one or two submission? I will take that in. Can you link? Yusufu, you want to say something? Okay, I think Yusufu is not here to talk. If you want to say something, can you flash your mic? Let me see. One or two. Oladokun. I see Oladokun is only two submissions before we move on. Okay, Oladokun,
Oh, that's me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry. Olukotun.
My bad.
Yeah,
Olukotun, I'm sorry.
yeah, that's fine. No, I just wanted to just rehash some of the things that Bonka said. So, Bonka talked about the Akintola Awolowo crisis. He, from a more personal perspective of Awolowo, but I just want to talk about it from what it looked from a political perspective. I'm reading Adebara Odogua's book on page 43, and he talks about how it played out politically. So by the end of the federal elections on December 11th, 1959, the Action Group had lost, and on December 12th, Chief Obafemi Awolowo became the leader of the opposition, while Chief Anthony Anhariho became Action Group's shadow minister. The Action Group crisis of 1962 broke out as a result of the appointment of Akintola as premier, while the hope of Awu becoming prime minister plummeted after losing the election in December 1959. A schism of authority developed and struggle for supremacy ensued between the party and the government. Chief Akintola, new premier of the Western region, while proclaiming party supremacy on policy matters, was accused of making decisions at variance with the party's policies. This soon created a vacuum between the party's national leaders and the office of the premier. Hence, the famous Action Group crisis of 1952 evolved. By May 19, 1962, the crisis reached its acme as the executive organs of the party tried the premier, that is Akintola, and found him guilty of maladministration and gross anti-party activities. Consequently, Akintola was advised to resign his two offices, deputy leader of the party and premier of the region. But he refused. This led to the governor, Sir Adesoji Aderemi, then Ooni of Ife, to revoke his appointment as the premier and concurrently appoint Alhaji Dauda Shoraye Adegberu in his place, in Akintola's place. On May 25th, 1962, Adegberu convened a meeting of the House of Assembly to debate a vote of no confidence in the new government. Chief Akintola and 11 AG legislators who joined him as a faction joined the NCNC opposition to cause hue and cry, or what could simply be called chaos, on the floor of the House to prevent the debate and voting. However, during the crisis, the Speaker's mace was broken and the police had to disperse the assembly with tear gas. This eventually led to a state of emergency in the Western region. After the end of the meeting of the Federal Parliament in Nigeria, Chief M.A. Majokodumi was appointed administrator of the region for 6 months before Akintola was reinstated as premier. So that's just a perspective I want to give as how it would have played out to the public in political terms.
Thank you, Mr. Olu Kotun. I will not make that mistake again. And to the audience, it's not unusual to have political and ideological differences where what's really bad is if it becomes personal and cult of personality, if that supersedes the intention of taking care of the common people, something good does not often happen. So I want to pass the mic to Dee. So Dee, I know you are ready, right?
Yes, thank you very much. So let's just jump right in. We're going to talk about the current revenues. Between 1953 and 1960, especially after the 1954 Constitution Review, there was a bit of regional system in which all the regions managed their revenue. It was basically reallocated to all the regions based on what you contributed. A lot of the revenue, when it came in from the government, was separated into the accounts and it was basically just tracked. So we had a uh, we had the Department of of the government that was responsible for that. So it was like what we have today, um, like the way you have FAAC, like federal allocation, but it was entirely the entire revenue for the country, and it was split by regions, and a portion of it was kept for administration of the center. So we had northern region, western region, and eastern region. The aggregate revenue that was shared again. The table is, if you just go to page 243, and it talks about the revenue controlled by each region. So we'll start from 1953. 5 million pounds approximately came into the western region. In 1954, 5 million pounds. By 1955, that number had pretty much doubled to about 11.6 million pounds. By 1956, that was about 10.5 million pounds. By 1957, it jumped again to 11.4 million pounds. By 1958, it was 12.3 million pounds. By 1959, it was 13.4 million pounds, and by 1960, the Western region had about 15.2 million pounds. Just to put it in perspective, um, the northern, I don't want to compare with the northern region, and I don't want to compare with the eastern region. So
No, no, go ahead and do the comparison. Indeed, that's actually
yeah,
one of the parallels.
okay, so just to put it in perspective, whilst the Western region was growing at almost like they were adding, consistently trying to, do better than last year, except for 1956. In almost every year, Western region actually achieved a growth, a year-on-year revenue growth basis. If we compare it across the line, as at 1953, the Northern region actually had a revenue of 7.6 million pounds compared to the 5 million pounds approximately of the Western region. But by the following year, the Western region had added another 590,000 pounds to its account and took it from about 5 million to 5.5. But the Northern region had lost about 2.5 million pounds. So it went from about 7.6 to about 4.7. And this trend was not very unsimilar. By the time it got to, I think, 1957, the revenue of the Western region was about 11.4 million pounds, while that of the Northern region was still at 7.8 million pounds. By 1960, when the revenue of the Western region was at about 15.2 million pounds, the revenue of the Northern region was about 11.3, 11.8 million pounds, because they were getting some other allocation. Majority of the revenue came in from port duties, came in from our ability to industrialize, trade, exports. One important factor that Awolowo puts in the Western region was that he was very intentional about the all the different agricultural development boards. He wanted it to be, apart from the fact that he literally incentivized cooperatives to give out loans to farmers. There was the Western Region Finance Corporation, which was established in 1955, and it took the function of just granting loans, like a loan corporation, to make sure that a lot of people had access to loans, and then they could use that to develop and to industrialize. And they gave out loans between then and 1962, almost 4.4 million pounds. As a matter of fact, by 1960, it had granted loans totaling 1.4 million pounds for industrial purposes. In suitable cases, it made direct equity investment in businesses for which indigenous capital was not readily available. So what this meant was, again, that there were some even businesses, that the Western region would literally invest in, like, just to make sure that those revenues were cornered for the Western region. This was a consistent practice of the Western region under Awolowo, and it did result in a lot of economic benefits for the Western region. So you know just being able to, now we've plotted the graph on the revenue, you've seen how the revenue came in. Right now, let's talk about all the different smaller projects and their economic implications. We're going to look at some of our natural resources. You look at the formation of the boards of those companies that mine those natural resources, how we brought them together, and you also see, like, connect the dots between the way Awolowo and the Western region of the 1950s, the way the approach they had for crystallization of the Western region assets and natural resources, and of course in how they converted it to revenue, and how they made sure that some of those things resulted in what did they call it, in returns for the people of the Western region, that they could then reinvest in so many things. So one major revenue for Western region was in oil palm produce. So in the Western region, for instance, uh, we had a lot of oil mills that were refining oil palm produce, and this was another consistent what do they call it, attribute. You even had a research institute at Benin that was responsible for the supply of high quality seedlings for the Western region. All of these were, many attempts that were championed and pioneered by Awolowo. Cocoa was grown by peasant farmers, and it accounted for about 95% of the produce from Nigeria. It came from the Western region. And not only did he have um, overwhelming impact on our revenue, because cocoa was a very big deal then. What he also did was he funded our cocoa marketing board, and they literally would go out, to different countries. They used to go on something what we call exhibitions today. I think back in the 60s it was called trade shows. So it was like when they'll go to Norway, they'll go to Germany, they'll go on, like the way you have like road shows, like tours, like they'll go to different countries. Say we are from the Western region marketing board, we have cocoa, these are samples, you can cultivate it, make your chocolate, make your this, make your that, and we'll guarantee the product. Everything from the farm is packed in cranes ready to go. Once you place your order, make your payment, we'll guarantee you, like on behalf of the entire, I don't know how to explain it. It's like, okay, let's put it in perspective so that we don't make it so expensive. Let's think of it the way we think of Nigeria's crude oil. The way Nigeria's crude oil now is being done, it's almost as if intermediaries. So the Nigerian government doesn't you know uh go to foreign countries, negotiate trade treaties to say, look, we have for instance China, we have crude oil. Let us sell to some of the major buyers or major factories that can then refine the crude or whatever, or companies that would use crude as to power their machineries and stuff like that. But instead, they sell to. I don't know if you guys remember that Diziani and that particular gentleman that is still on the run. So Nigerian NNPC will sell to people like that. I think his name was Kola or something, and then he will go and sell on behalf of Nigeria to other people. So they call them like intermediaries, like those people buy off Nigerian government and go sell. But when it was the turn of Awolowo to do it, he did it a little bit differently, in the sense that he took responsibility for making sure that he got the best deals all over the countries, all over the world. And it was like a very, very difficult thing for, like, if nowadays, if maybe like maybe your friend or somebody's dad just got the position of like a ambassador to Greece, or ambassador to Turkey, or ambassador to Germany, you guys, everybody would be like, mad, or cash out and everything. But back then in the 60s, it was more like a blessing and a curse, because you will be on your toes to look for trade deals for the Western region. You will be on your toes to sell rubber, to sell cotton, to sell cocoa, to sell, and these are some of the things that actually propelled those revenue growth you saw that came into the Western region. And then in return, they funded all the economic development that we had. In terms of rubber, we were one of, I think at a particular point in time, the rubber from the Western region, I can't remember if it was 20% or 40% of the world's production of rubber came from Nigeria, and in particular the Western region and some parts of the Eastern region. And this was very intentional again about Awolowo. There were so many things that they did differently, bringing Korean people to train tappers. Yeah, Awolowo, between the Eastern and Western region, they cultivated 250,000 hectares of land just for the purpose of rubber exploitation. And you might not know how big of a deal it is, but at the point in time, we're controlling 40-50% of the world's rubber production. Those things, they did two things in particular. They encouraged a lot of companies to come into Nigeria to set up plastic factories. So we had rubber plantations that were that they literally were off-takers for companies like the United Africa Company of Nigeria and even Dunlop as well. Those plantations were directly feeding into those local factories. So it was like, the way we have crude oil now, but we don't have refineries for the crude. So we take the crude out of the country, go sell it, then we'll not buy the byproducts. All those things, they have their implications on trade, on GDP. They have their implications on the currency, the value of the naira and stuff like that. So, but it was kind of like a bit different under Awolowo's time because it was saying, look, here's our crude. Come and set up factories. Come and refine it. Become off-takers. So as they are producing the natural resources, you are refining it. And rubber was such a big deal back then from the second industrial revolution, from the 1880s down to almost 1980s. Rubber was always a big deal. Think of cars, think of bicycle, think of even the porcelain, all those small developments in real estate. Everything, their rubber demand, in particular in Europe, was very big, and it was a very big revenue source for the Western region. So just think of it that these are the things that you know we're doing differently then that we are no longer doing now. Some of this value system has been completely corroded. Some of those ministers, you hear things like they will go, you go to the embassies, they'll tell you minister is not around or this and that. Those things could never happen. They were literally trade pariahs. They will go from country to country trying to cut deals. Like, look, somebody will go try and sell rubber, somebody will go try and sell cocoa. Everybody had like portfolios that they were chasing, more like marketers. I don't want to, the way we look at all these marketers, like that was literally their job because they were fueling an industrial revolution in the South. And if you look at it, it gave so many what did you call it? It gave so many immediate impacts. I already mentioned how rubber dependency dropped because we're not just producing for local consumption, we're also exporting. So that was a revenue source. And these were things that were predominantly available. We had a fruit juice canning factory. As at 1951, they set up somewhere that was canning 100 in 1952, the output at Ibadan factory included 392,000 cans of grapefruit, 58,000 cans of grapefruit juice, 5,000 cans of pineapple crushed slices, and 2,000 cans of other Nigerian food stuff. These were some of the other things that Awolowo reinvested the money in. We're also very big um, we're also very big in the fish business as well, and it was fought by Awolowo's vision to invest in boat building factories. So around the Epe region, there were a lot of boat building factories who took loans from but they were pretty much encouraged and incentivized to build canoes and boats to allow people to be able to go deep into the shoreline, get fish, bring it back into. Until today, some of those fish markets still exist, especially in Ekpe, and it started under that period because they were able to get boats, start going into deeper sea lines to get fish, so that the protein pressure for the Western region was sort of a bit stable. So he also did his own abattoirs, modern these cattle colonies and cattle reserves. All of those things Awolowo thought of, and he did differently. But you look at the leaders of today, they will only complain, Nigerians are importing fish too much. Ban fish, ban importation of fish. Don't give them dollar to import fish, because that is kind of solution that comes from the Central Bank of Nigeria today. When back in the 50s and 60s, when Awolowo was running things, he said that rather than ban fish, why don't we build boats or give people opportunities to have boats? Let them go deep into the ocean. Let them get this fish, bring it back and sell it. They will reduce two things. It will reduce the dependency for importation of fish into the Western region. More importantly, it will also create revenue, like it will boost the economy. There will be small shops opening up because the fishermen are coming. People will start trucking it into the hinterland. As opposed to what we have today, that predominantly majority of almost 80 to 90% of the fish consumption in this country comes from cold trucks, imports from Argentina. We even have the fish named after the country. That's how bad things have been or things are now. So these are some of the visions that a visionary can have. I already mentioned the tire trading factory. There were so many what do they call it, in Benin that time, which was similarly under the Western region. There was a sawmill, there was a rubber processing plant. In Abeokuta there was a brewery. There was in Ikorodu, they had a lot of pottery works, not just for local consumption, for export as well. Pottery works, pottery manufacturing. Some of those things today, they sound like myths. There were foundry works in Lagos, railway engineering like companies in Lagos as well, textile manufacturing companies in Lagos, furniture manufacturing companies in Lagos. All of these were strategic things to do that they reduce the dependency of the Western region going out, to get this product, because most of the things that although we're still importing, we're able to control our what do they call it, our local economy. So when you hear things like, oh, in the 60s $2 was 1 naira, this is what did it. An understanding of balancing your imports, creating a lot of opportunities for local industries to thrive. But it doesn't just make sense that they did it then. What makes it more frustrating is that if you compare the same situation with what we have now, you see that our leaders are intentionally doing the complete opposite, which is why we are not growing, which is why the naira is, shrinking. I wonder why Awolowo didn't just think that instead of going to Ekpe, incentivizing people to have boat building factories, make sure that the fishing industry is stabilized, is boosted. Why didn't he just say the solution is let us ban importation of fish into the Western region? Let us, nobody can get loans for fish if you want to import. Just put that side by side with what CBN does. The moment they have a problem with a particular product, even flour, even rice, whatever they do, they ban currency for availability for that product. They close borders. They do all sorts of barbaric policies. What does it lead to? Every economist, even if you go to some of Nairametrics from today, they will tell you about food inflation. All of those things, they spike your food inflation. When you are having inflation, you're having reduced economic growth, you're having increased population growth, your country is going to collapse eventually. These are key economic indicators that everybody looks at. So you are consistently having food inflation. Why? Because you're shutting your borders instead of you to look for ways to incentivize industries. And these solutions are still applicable to today. Imagine if the government, instead of doing 10,000 buses that they always do, and give it to members of the NURTW to secure their return or on the governorship election and things like that. Why not do 10,000 boats? Give it to these fishermen. Let them be able to what? To be able to go into the inner rivers. Give them protection. Let them be able to go. Most of the countries in West Africa that are actually by the sea, I think other than maybe Ghana or something, are almost net exporters of fish. If you go today, Nigerians import fish from Gambia. From Gambia, it's one of their biggest markets, fish to Nigeria. It's literally a line on their GDP, like revenue. But what do? We don't fish. All the sea lines, everything is just like protected just for shipping trolleys to come and dump container loads of frozen fish in our ports. But we, on the other hand, that we actually have the sea line, we do nothing about it. These are some of the daft economic policies that they continue to perpetuate to destroy the economy of the West. Is what you have that you put on the table. You have a sea, you have fish in the sea, you don't fish it. People will come from other countries to take it. So there are so many things that are very, very, very obvious in the way the Western region was run. And all of these things, even in cement, I wanted to talk just very briefly about cement. What do we have today in terms of cement in Nigeria? You have public corporations, private companies having exclusive rights of cement and limestone deposits. In fact, I heard one rumor, I want to believe is a lie, that a particular Alaji has all the rights of all the limestone deposits discovered and undiscovered in the Western region. Isn't that amazing? Both discovered and undiscovered mines. Like, so that was why that tiff between two cement companies happened, because somebody was trying to say, well, I own this deposit, and somebody was trying to say, well, I've paid for it. So it became okay, let the president decide who owns what, and it became who can bribe more and stuff like that. But the point we're trying to make is, when it was Awolowo's turn, when we were going to set up the cement factories, they had, look at this thing. So in February 1959, the West African Portland Cement Company Limited was incorporated in Nigeria as a public company to own and operate the cement works. The equity capital of the company was subscribed by Associated Portland Cement Manufacturers 51%, the Western Nigerian Development Corporation 39%, and the United Africa Company Limited 10%. The rate output doubled from 200,000 tons per annum, which was double what was available in Enugu at that time. The factory was conveniently sited at Ewekoro at a point, and the main truck road and railway converged to about 300 yards of each other. So what was I trying to draw your attention to? The Western region owned 39% of the cement output at Ewekoro, whilst the other what do they call it? The other investors own 61%. What is the case today? You pay a portion of your revenue, you as in taxes, you pay a portion of your revenue as to get mining licenses, and you pay bribes and all of that, and then you become a billionaire literally on the limestone deposit of the Yoruba people. That is exactly what is happening today. But Awolowo didn't do that. He didn't say go and take a license to mine. Go and take he took a percentage of the company. He took a percentage of the company, 39%, so that way, as the company prospers, the Yoruba people prosper, not the individuals, not the one or two persons that was able to quickly go and secure mining licenses. He gave out the license, yes, go and develop a coral limestone deposit. But as a matter of fact, we too will have a stake in the company. So if that company grows to become a $1 trillion company, well, we now have 39% of a $1 trillion company. Now, that is the way visionaries think, because they put the people in first. But the way our governments think, they will reverse the process such that just pay us a license to have rights to the limestone, and then just pay some bribes. And then when you pay those bribes, you have your license to do the milestone. If you like, make 50 billion, become the richest person in the whole of the world, whilst the rest of the people around you live in penury. They don't give two fucks. Sorry, pardon my French. But differently was how it was done in the 50s. And those little tweaks in economic policies is what was responsible for the economic stability of not just the Western region, but even at Nigeria at large. More than 40 to 50% of the revenue at some times were coming from the Western region. At a point in time, 45% of the revenue of the country was coming from the Western region. And if you look at the land size, it wasn't that big. But today, the case is still very similar to today, right? Even if you look at IGR figures for the West versus all the other states. But more importantly, the implementation of how the revenue was spent is kind of very, very different. That is why we seem to be heavily taxed, but we don't see dividends of democracy in the West. So I'll yield at that, but I hope I've been able to explain to you just the kind of visionary Awolowo was. He had a different way of looking at things. Many of these things, European countries still do it to today. You find out that they own shares in even I think there was a Norway or something that their diaspora or sovereign wealth fund actually has investments in like 20 of the top 500 S&P companies, because those Norway people too were visionaries. They were thinking of how to protect the wealth of the future for the people of Norway. It's very different from the Nigerian politicians we have today, which are just felons and bandits who siphon money out of the economy, redistribute it to a few of their friends, and they stash the rest in Swiss banks. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Day.
Thank you.
I have one observation. When Day was starting, he talked about the constitution was recently amended. And that's very important because at that time, there was a practice of amending the constitution before election. Then secondly, then I have another question for the Day. Sorry, I will bring you back. If you can, in 1 minute, summarize by telling us what the national debt of Nigeria was at that time. And if you answer that question, then I want to navigate to Bonka. If Awolowo gets sick at that time, where does he receive his medical treatment? So if they can answer and navigate it back to Bonka, then we'll continue.
I'll just give me a minute. I want to check something.
I also have a question. Maybe I should just ask it along with what you just asked.
Go ahead with your question. Go ahead.
Yeah. So D, I would like to, if it would be good if you can enlighten us as to all these things you've taught us. Why must we have our own Yoruba nation to get back to it? Why can't we just figure out a way to implement these things within Nigeria so we will all have collective prosperity? Why must we rock the boat?
Okay, sorry, please, who asked that question?
Olukatu.
Olukatun. Okay, thank you very much. Let me just answer the second question immediately. You see, the problem with Nigeria, and this is the problem with a lot of Western people, and even Niger Delta people that have natural resources, is to think that your burden is like that humanitarian feel. Like the America is one of the richest countries in the world. They literally have I think maybe 22 or 21 trillion dollar economy. I can't remember. their next door neighbor, Mexico, has a 1.2 trillion, 1 trillion and $58 billion economy. It's not bad. It's still 3 times that or 2 times that of Nigeria comfortably. But Americans don't take the resources of America to go develop Mexico. We were ethnic nations before the balkanization, and when we restructured, we had ethnic nations. But the mistake is that when Aburi was going on, we didn't pay attention to what it was saying. That Aburi Accord, it basically said that no central government can declare a state of emergency in the other regions. That ticking bomb is what led us to where we are today, where a central government can take the revenue from the Lagos ports, take it to the center, and then redistribute it back to Lagos. And Lagos will get just 116 billion, despite the fact that Lagos port generated close to 1 trillion naira in revenue. That problem comes from a flawed constitution. If you continue to coexist in that nation with people who continue to control the political infrastructure of the country, you will never be able to get out of it. And more importantly, unrestricted migration. There are two problems a lot of people don't know that faces Yoruba nation today. You think our revenue is unlimited. Our revenue is not unlimited. All these things that we can do to prosper the Yoruba nation, it exists on the platter that we are able to control our population. So one of the things that you will notice that, again, just in that period, the Western region had a population that was approximately between 11 million, and it was out of 55 million population in Nigeria at that time, but it was about 20% of the population. So we were able to grow natural resources, grow education, grow health infrastructure, free education. We were able to grow all these other smaller things because our population we were able to control it. By the current population, there's been an influx of rural urban migration, a lot of attempts to change the demographics of people. That continuous pressure from a set of the country that is very comfortable to grow their population in the region of one unemployed man, 4 wives, and 17 children, and compare it to the Western region where I'm sure you know the Yorubas are the most educated tribe in Africa. Because of the quality of education for the Yorubas, you will see that a lot of people, they practice this kind of, I don't want to say natural self-birth control, but you will not see a Yoruba man give birth to children that he can't train. It's very unlikely that you see a Yoruba man have 2, 3, 4 children, but he doesn't have plans to train them, or he doesn't have the financial capacity to train them. Even drivers, cleaners, house helps, they all have this vision that their children should go to school, which is why they work so hard. But in some other places, they believe that what it is God's grace to train your children. So if you continue to coexist in such a country where they have unchecked migration into your space, what they do is that they will continue to put pressure on your revenue system, your revenue cycle. What that means is that, let me explain it to you in a very simple but less complicated manner. Look at it in just hectares of land per rural dweller. In 1950, 1960, it was about 2 hectares of land per rural dweller. By just 30 years after, it was about 0.9. So it had gone from 2 hectares to 0.9. 10 years after that, it was already 0.5. Nigeria's population is projected to hit 896 million by 2100. Who do you think is fueling that population growth? Just to put it in perspective, America is projected to just add about 1 million to 2 million in population between this current population and what their population will be in 2100. China, that is over 1 billion in population, is estimated to half their population by that 2100. Nigeria, on the other hand, is estimated to triple their population by 2100. This is evident that even in the last 60 years, from 1963, when the population was about 55 million, to today, just 60 years, we are in about 206 million, almost times 4 population growth. That population growth puts pressure on your land resources. That is why you have a lot of attempts to have reallocation of landowners, to give non-landowners opportunities to begin to settle into places that were homogeneously, for instance, for Yoruba people, for Tiv people in the Middle Belt, for Jukun people, for the Tangas, for the Biroms. This land were always theirs. Because of population growth, people are migrating from another region into your space. So one of the advantages that Yoruba Nation could do,
Sorry, even in other countries too, into the
yes. So even if like I said, the population growth is one of the reasons, because in Yoruba Nation you can check rural non-indigenous migration into Yoruba land. Under a restructured Nigeria, it will be very difficult. Number two is that the political machinery that is required to keep and protect the integrity of the Yoruba space will never be achieved if people still have to go to the center. One of the problems Awolowo had with the Western region was that he was focusing on the Western region, but was also focusing on the center. Right? We would also agree that if Awolowo never left the Western region in the 1960s, we would never have fallen into the likes of Akitola. So the Western region, for it to be protected, it needs to be all about just Yoruba people, Yoruba first in the Western region. If you continue to lump, or even in the southern Nigeria, along people who don't share the same value construct with you, you will continue to have political challenges. Let me give you an example. Do you know that Katsina, Jigawa, and Kano generate more votes than the entire Western region? Those three states generate more political votes than the entire Western region. Yet, Lagos State generates more revenue than 11 states in the north. So, this gives you a mindset that if you have unproductive population who can control the politics of things, they can continue to work to rewrite and frustrate constitutional reforms because it will never favor them. So you ask yourself, what does it favor Jigawa man to vote for resource control bill on behalf of the Bayelsa man, or on behalf of the is it Abba man or something, that they have just 3 or 8 members of the House of Representatives when Jigawa has 12? So they would never, under political solutions, they will never vote for you to have a two-third majority, because even the two-third majority can never come from the South. All the House of Assembly, we've done the numbers, all the House of Assembly of the South, of the West, of the East, put together of the South cannot win a simple majority, because you need to start thinking of flipping states like Gombe, like Niger, like Kano, Katsina, to be able to get into the two-third majority required to make constitutional reforms. As complicated or as simple as each region should control their natural resources. Since we became unified, it has been a game changer for the North, and they continue to do it, and they will continue to do it for as long as we remain docile and we do nothing about it. Because number one, they are the greatest beneficiaries. They have more revenue for what they don't produce. Their politicians are enjoying it. The people might not even be knowing, which is another thing. Like, the money might not be getting to the ground, but at least the politicians are skimming it right off the top, whilst the Westerners are putting in their effort, getting taxed unfairly for it. As you're paying your taxes to for the government, you're getting nothing in return. You're not even getting preferential education positions, because they'll tell you that the West and the East and the South are educationally advantaged regions. You're not getting preferences for jobs that you want, because when it comes to NYC, they send you to dead deserts without any single company in sight for you to go serve, because you're a southerner. And then they bring the northerners, they bring them into your juicy positions in NNPC, in FIRS, in all the other federal parastatals, Nigerian port authorities, and they populate them and they retain them. Whilst you go into desert lands with maybe just one school in 5,000 kilometers, and then after you are done with the school, you in fact, you even force yourself to redeploy back for safety reasons, and you get nothing, absolutely nothing. So education, you start with a -4 because you are disenfranchised. So somebody can go with 104, 140 and study medicine, and you have to go with 270 because you are from an educationally advantaged region. Then after you even manage to rockul it, you go and, when it comes to getting work for the federal works, everything is favoring one side, because all the institutions that make sense are in that side, but the persons that run the institutions are from the north. The language of communication, immigration, customs, police, even army, navy. I mean, somebody was saying that the war command chant vigilantes in Hausa. I mean, it's so crazy the kind of hegemony that we have allowed to continue for so long. So if you think that political solutions, everybody get into self-determination political party is the route that favors you, by all means go for it. You will never find any objections from me. I will not ask you questions. I will just tell you my history and my piece, which is why I'm not joining you, right? But if you feel that self-determination is a route, because for us, the process should be clear. It is constitution before election. But a lot of people think that it is election before constitution. So that therein lies the conflict. Those people that believe that it is constitution, uh, um, election before constitution, want the self-determination people to fold into political groups, and that is also fine because that is the prism upon which you are looking at it from. Whether or not it is visible, whether or not it is a 20-year waste of time or it's a 60-year waste of time, there's no amount of data that will show you that will make you not believe. Like I told this morning in another room, for the 27 years that Nelson Mandela was in prison, there were more than maybe 6 to 7 elections that are held consistently like clockwork every 4 years or 5 years. I think it's 5 years in South Africa. They didn't stop elections because a black man was in prison. They didn't stop elections because the 80% of the black population of South Africa were fighting for constitutional reform to repeal apartheid. As a matter of fact, some black men joined political parties, got their PVCs, and they got into power. But nothing changed. Not the first 5 years, not the next 10 years, not for 27 years. When Mandela came out, he could have also jumped on the bandwagon, used his newfound fame, go join a political party, right? And join any party he joined, he would have been given direct presidency or something, and then he would have probably won. But no, Mandela did not do that. The first step for him was to repeal apartheid, was to fix the constitution before he then put out his vote to say, I will be running for ANC presidential ticket, right? After he got it, then he went for election, cast his votes, and he won. And then he did that famous walk where he says something and the people respond, where he says power and people respond to the people. I wish my South African was good. I would have done it in the way he did it. So the point I'm trying to make again is that if you feel that it is election
Amanda.
so something so if you feel that it is election before constitution, go for it. If you feel that it is constitution before election, come towards us because we are also thinking that way. Those that want to go for political parties, I tell them, if you like, go APC, go PDP, or do your own party, call it self-determination political party of Yoruba people. That's fine. Put yourself on the ballot, go for it. Nobody will disturb you. But be rest assured that nobody can amend the constitution from being represented to that um, um, to that House of Assembly because you swear on the Constitution. And the moment you raise something to dissolve Nigeria or to balkanize Nigeria, that is treason on that constitution. But the people responsible for fixing that constitution can never be the elected people because they are elected to what? To refine laws. They are not elected to refine constitution. The constitutional reform process comes from the people. So what people think is that Awolowo was able to go for a constitutional reform because he was a politician that won a couple of seats. No, Awolowo went for that constitutional reform on behalf of the Yoruba people, not the politician, not as a politician, but as a leader for the Yoruba people. So it is Yoruba people that will elect their own representative to go and reform the constitution, not the politicians. The politicians are a bit separate. Yes, the constitution now governs how the politicians are going to work, but you can never do it from going. Even let me give you something less complicated. How many people remember when Shina Pella, just about, I think it's about 6 or 8 months ago, wanted to complain about the NSAS protest and Femi Gbajamiamila shut him down? Did anything change? Shina Pella still continued his work. He literally just wanted to talk about NSAS. That is all. He just wanted, as he just started opening his mouth, he just said, look at this youthful, newly elected legislator. He just said, you don't have the chance, you don't have the chance. Out of order, they hit the gavel and they shut him. He even said that if I will not be allowed to exercise my right as a lawfully elected member of something constituency, that I'm going to walk out. And the person sitting beside him just looked the other way and east. inside this, and they were not talking about balkanizing Nigeria or even resource control, something ridiculously difficult. All they were talking about was the unfair treatment of the police on the youth, because he felt it was a youth representative or something. So I do really wish you well, but that's that. On the issue of the debt, Nigeria had some debt. The numbers are not particularly outrageous. It was manageable. One thing that was complicated about the debt regime is that we had very little or no debt up until 1966 when we went for that war, and that war just led us into some ridiculous spending. Like the financing of the war was, even a lot of um, the trade-offs to finance the war came from things like people saying that you come and we'll give you weapons, you give us your crude licenses or stuff like that. So you begin to see the invisible hand of Britain in the civil war, financing of weapons, financing of intelligence, and more importantly, in exchange for the likes of your Chevron of America and your Shell and your British Petroleum getting mining rights in the Niger Delta, getting 50-year oil licenses. So those of you that have heard Tony Nadi speak, that is where it began to come from to say, look, you don't have AK-47s, you don't have this, you don't have shields, you don't have battle tanks and all of that. We'll finance for you, we'll give it to you, we'll even give you cheaper ones and everything, but don't pay cash, take loans, the ones you cannot afford to buy outrightly, give us oil blocks in favor of that. And they bought it at ridiculous prices, got as much as 50-year licenses that were signed by the military, by the government, and those things are unrepealed till today. In fact, that was one of the things that motivated Tony Nadine's work when he saw the 50-year mining license, and it was like, what kind of person can sign oil license far beyond his own bet and debt rate? Nobody does that. So let's leave the mic and we can return back to Bunker. I'm getting a lot of notifications that we have a second program about to go live, so I really apologize, but I think the moderators will have more information about that. I think there's another program that is scheduled to run for this particular time, so we'll begin to take more speakers. Thank you. Maybe for Lauren Shaw.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, just really quickly, Mr. D. I heard you speak yesterday and today, and I actually agree with most of what you're saying. But if, say, for example, people aren't going to take the political route to, constitutional reform, so what is the actual step by step? You kind of mentioned briefly, Awolowo came forward as a Yoruba leader, and he pushed for the constitutional reform more as a leader than a politician. So is that what you're suggesting? Correct me if I'm wrong. To have a leader for the Yoruba nation who would then represent the Yoruba people and push for the
Absolutely.
constitutional. Okay, cool. Thank you. So who?
Just like Malobi, do you know the man called Pa Edwin Clark?
Pa Edwin Clark. No, I know John Henry Clark, but not Pa Edwin.
He's a Niger Delta leader.
Yes, but he's also not a politician, but he speaks for the Niger Delta people. That is what is going to be required for the indigenous ethnic nations to begin to withdraw their mandates. Politicians are not the ones responsible. It's the ethnic nations that will vote their representatives that will then. So that is why what we're trying to do is essentially it's called activating the people power. Trying to get the ethnic nations to know their powers, to know their rights. This is a very miseducated, misinformed generation of people who think that their life revolves around politicians, when in actual fact, your politicians are actual servants, which is why the story of the Operation Wet here really, really, really inspires me, because that was in recent history when the Yoruba people came together to say, you know what, it's like these politicians think we're playing. You think you can game us on our own votes on our own land, man. You have something else coming, and they did deal with them. They did. I think that thing is one thing that I can say I'm proud of the Yoruba people for in modern democracy. That ability to resist political imposition on Yoruba people. And it's still very popular. There's still relics of it in Ibadan and all of that. So I'll mute for now. I don't know if any other person wants to add. Please, I really love if Bonka can walk us through Operation Wet here in his submission. Please, I
I
beg of
have
you.
a
It
question.
inspires me. Brian, please go for it.
D, D, I have a question for you. Yeah, D, there was you spoke about certain states having numbers, a lot of population, but not no
Economic
productivity.
influence. Yeah.
I wanted to flip it now for you to say it's getting pretty obvious that some of the assets, right, that are in the public sector, right, has to go through, has to be, taken into the private sector in order to be productive. Now, my question to you, I have my views on this, but my question to you is in a Nigeria that um, a particular a region seems to be, favorable to the idea of certain assets being in the public sector. What do you think would happen if it's proposed that certain assets? I give you an example. Like I give you an example of what if you go to the private sector if you go to the private arm or private sector of the oil industry, you would see that it's mostly run by Southerners, right? But when you go to your NMPCs of this world, you will see that the equation changes. Now, my question really to you is that with the population we have of now, the control the North has, how does that uh, 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 help us move forward, nation?
So, two perspectives. I will start with the first perspective. Two perspectives. I'll start with the second one. Population. A lot of people think that population is relevant. When in the fourth industrial revolution, population was only relevant in the first industrial revolution. The world is in the fourth industrial revolution. It is not Nigeria's job to populate the world. We're not the world's, I mean, we are right now one of the world's largest organ donor factories, which is we basically give birth to people whose entire value to the world would be to get their organs illegally harvested for heart donors, for kidneys, for eyes, for ears. I mean, we know what the INI story is. Those of you that follow David and Doy, is one of the, should I say, benefits of having a very poor, useless population. So we literally just give birth to human beings. For the, we might as well just call it the world's, body parts supplement center, because that's what Nigeria is. In terms of actual productivity, there's nothing like that happening. It's very limited, and that is why your GDP per capita is like 2,200, and that is why a lot of Nigerians would rather die as prostitutes in Libya, in Morocco, than come back home to next to nothing. That is why you have a police budget of less than 3,000 naira per citizen. That is why your policemen will be willing to kill you for 1.5. I think the last one that happened was it not 500 that they killed the gentleman for. So
It was 15 naira, sir.
it was 15 naira. So Nigeria's population, don't get it twisted, is one of the biggest disadvantages for Nigeria. In the first industrial revolution, which is what Buhari is trying to take us back into, the agrarian age, the age of beans and corn and maize and cotton. In that age, having a huge labor force or on having a huge number of people, whether skilled or unskilled, they contributed to farm output. So in that time, it was relevant. By the time the world moved into the second and third industrial revolution, population or labor became least important, but it was entrepreneur that was the most important factor in the factors of production. So labor was good to have in a decent amount, but what really drove the second and third industrial revolution was the ability to have capital, which is you need to be rich to invest in the machines, right? And the third industrial revolution was followed by your ingenuity, your intelligence, entrepreneurship. Right now, Nigeria many countries in the southern part of the country are able to, many states, many nations, many businesses, private sector are able to function effectively in transition between the second and third industrial revolution. We are not going to kid ourselves. The little bit of tech revolution you're having happening in Lagos today, the 1 trillion unicorn companies are largely foreign companies, foreign owned businesses who have headquarters or subunits in Nigeria. So don't think that we have transited into the fourth industrial revolution simply because of the spots of Flutterwave or Jumia or that. No. Majority of those shares, majority of those revenues are still being repatriated back to the countries that were the seed investors for those businesses. So yes, we are transiting from the second industrial revolution to the third industrial revolution. A large part of the north, that is why they will tell you today that we produce cowpeas, we produce SME seed, that we should do a train to Niger so that we can export cowpeas, instead of them to invest that same money into refining cowpeas into products that they can then sachet and sell. So you see, that is where the thinking is locked. Their thinking is locked in cattle colony. When the world is doing industrial ranches, even the largest exporters of milk and all of that, they will easily tell you if the Chancellor of Germany walked into Nigeria, the sub Buhari wanted to spend billions of dollars on cattle colony, they will just simply ask him a question: which cows are you planning to, put in the colonies when you've invested all this money, gone to take people's land and everything? And they will tell you it's the Fulani cow. I said, but this cow produces less than 2 liters of milk a day. My own cows in my country, they do 22 liters of milk a day. Why are you investing to produce milk or any other thing from these your cows? They might as well be dogs or own pets, because they really don't do much. The average Nigerian cow produces about maybe between 70 to 140 kg of meat. The average foreign cow does easily times 2, times 3 of that. We don't even want to talk about the leather tanneries that are non-existent. So those are things that happened in the first industrial revolution, which is why the North is hell bent on making sure that they transit or they maximize where they are. So on the question of population, it is a dead weight on the South, because the population is unchecked, is unregulated, it is uneducated, it is virtually useless. Now, on the second part is that you see why Nigeria's public sector continues to fail and why the private sector seems to thrive, why there is a sharp difference between the quality of service, the quality of product that you get from public sector in Nigeria and private sector in Nigeria, is simply because an inferior product cannot give you an inferior output. So an inferior product, which is a product that did not meet the threshold for education, but was given a pass because it comes from an educationally disenfranchised region. An inferior product that did not meet the threshold to get the job, but was given the job because it comes from an educationally disenfranchised zone, cannot give you an excellent service. It will only give you a mediocre service, because at best its thinking is mediocre. If you really wanted to change the public sector, you would do what the private sector are doing, which is you hire people based on competence. You don't ask them that, oh, where are you from? Then you give them the job. You look at their CV, you look at their qualifications, you look at what they excel, and then you do a job fit, and then you give them the job. But Nigeria's public sector or public service is designed for quota system. Everybody gets a share. And majority of the people coming from this region are mediocre, and they seem to be getting, no surprise, the larger portion of that workforce, the larger portion of the politicians that shape the discourse for that workforce. So just put the equation in, garbage out. Mediocre thinking, mediocre results. Mediocre people, mediocre public service. Your public service is an aggregation of the people that drive it. Their thinking, their initiative, their value system, all those things are shaped by how they've always been. This is the problem. So once you connect the dots, you know that Nigeria's public sector is designed to fail. That's why they cannot think of something ingenious. The only time it can work is if you have people of shared value construct managing their shared value resources. Just think of it this way. How come the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service generates more revenue than the State Revenue Board of maybe 15, maybe 6 to 7 northern states who have 3 times the population of Lagos? As in, I was reading a crazy statistics. The Lagos State Park Agency, that's the agency that regulates planting of, they call it last park. The ones that says that you can't fell trees, you pay a fine, that you have to water trees. Before you trim trees in your compound, you call them, you get a ticket, you pay a fine. What if I told you that that particular agency, which is one of like 16 agencies that work with Lagos State, generates more revenue than an entire state in the north, your president's state? Isn't that crazy? That's insane. That's like, so you're not comparing apples and oranges in the Nigerian system. You are comparing, laptops with calculator, because they are essentially computers, but one can do so much more and is a laptop, and the other one is at best a calculator. So if you're thinking that the public sector can all of a sudden transcend, no, it is doomed to fail. It is designed to fail, and it is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. As a matter of fact, the public sector is a reflection of who we are as a country. The private sector is the exception, because the private sector people have different mentality, they have different targets, so they invest in talent that can drive their targets, and they go for the best. In the public sector, we go for quota system, which means that everybody gets a slice of the service, including the worst. So when people say, oh, there's no passports in the country, oh, NNPC, there's no refinery, there's no electricity, if you want to solve all those things, give it back to the private people who can actually do it. And when I mean private people, if you're going to return public sector the way it is, do it the Awolowo way. Let the regions come up with a value system. When Akitola, who was literally in charge of the board, when Awolowo realized that this guy is not getting results, they changed him, didn't they? That is how people with shared value construct think. But if you as a southerner wants to change the guy managing NNPC, who is a northerner, because he's not meeting your target of refining petrol in the country, for instance, it becomes a problem, because the north will say you're removing their person, isn't it? Classic example, Pantami. So if you want to reform that dead public sector, and in closing, think of it that the natural resources that we are sharing in Nigeria, all of us will answer for it. My only confidence is that as a Yoruba man, I'll proudly beat my chest and tell the Niger Delta people when they come calling me that I looted their money. I'll say, no, 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 no. Yes, Nigeria looted from you, but they also looted from me, because we were generating revenue in our ports. We were generating revenue in our gas, but we were not getting a fair return, because the youths are going to come for it. These resources that we are looting and milking dry in between 1960 and 2000 and maybe 60. Hello, what happens to the generation after that? What are they going to loot? What are they going to use when oil is no longer relevant? But you have decimated their land. Some people are saying that organic cleanup is going to take like 70 years or something ridiculous like that. So it means that a generation is yet to be born. That's husband has not met the wife. The child is going to be born in that Ogoni land, and they are not going to see clean water, because me and you right now are enjoying Nigeria's crude that belongs to them. How are you going to explain to that generation? When the people tell you that the generation coming, because we have continued to marginalize the marginalization and injustice, because it is great injustice to take other people's resources to go and develop another people, simply because you did the population census and you say these people are more than people. So you're using other people's resources to take care of other people. That is what the Nigerian contraption is. It is that big brother mentality, that's audacity that a Jigawa senator will say that, a Jigawa House of Rep member will say that the oil in Bayelsa belongs to us. It is our home. So we will take care of the oil. I see myself as a Bayelsa Awusa or something ridiculous like that. This doesn't belong to you. The owners of the resources, it belongs to them, because they also own the liability. So that 13% you are giving them is the question that the generation coming after them is going to ask. To say, why would you own something and you only get 13% in return? And some other people own their gold and they get 100% in return. What is going on? Are you people that silly? Like, what was your thinking? And you say, we were at war, so we negotiated. And say, yeah, you did your Niger Delta, but at the end of the day, even with the 13%, it didn't do nothing. How long are you going to continue taking and taking and taking and giving nothing in return? There's a clip by Nana Kufudo, and Akufudo. She's I've forgotten her name. The lady in Burna Boy's video. He says, ever since we came in contact with the white man, you've continued to take and take and take, and in return you give us nothing, absolutely nothing. And the white man said, well, the lady said, oh well, is it not over now? He said, over where? Is it over? Is it really over? So with Nigeria has continued to take and take and take. You take their crude, take their gas, take their best brains, frustrate them politically, give them nothing in return. Kill them, give them suits, give them cancer, give them unbreathable water, unbreathable air, undrinkable water, nothing, not even roads. Erosion destroys them. You give them, you take and take and take, and you give nothing, not even dollar, nothing. You can't do nothing. You can't get currency right. You can't get employment right. You can't get population right. You can't get inflation right. You can't even get food prices right. Nothing. You take, take, take. You give them nothing in return. The generation that is coming, that is going to forge revolution, they wouldn't understand when you tell them, I'm sorry, I was in APC, but I was a Southwest politician. They wouldn't be able to add it. I don't know. They won't be able to forgive you. I think that's the word. Oh, you are what? Oh, your father was a governor, right? Your grandfather. Oh, excellent. You people looted our resources. You gave us nothing in return. Guys, a revolution is coming. By the time Nigeria's population hits 600, 700 million, you hear the way they talk about ethnic cleansing, that some people are saying that there are no more Turakis, there are no more Jukums, there are no more thieves left, right? That the land belongs to them, and if you want peace, you give them your land and go away. A time is coming that even Lagos might not be Yoruba land, because Igangan was almost no longer Yoruba land if they had their way. Same thing with Yewa. All those people are now IDPs and refugees in Benin, isn't it? The time is coming when they will be questioning to say, is Ondo Yoruba land? Because the population is more than the people. So they keep coming down because they keep on betting them, because they don't have chill. Like, their religion and state is the same. So their religion, their political, economic, and religious philosophy fuels population growth. Your own political, economic, and religious philosophy does not fuel population growth. Yet two of you are locked in the same country with endless migration. I cannot stop a Kano man from relocating to Lagos and coming to stay there. Whether they actually buy land, which is right, or they go into the farms or markets in Ketu and start to build their shanties, which we all know they do.
D, yeah, yeah. Sorry. Okay. We might need to round up now because it's an important session, and D is the
Why now, bunker?
And I
even me.
know we
I,
You know,
we
this is
I
very
didn't.
important. I
I didn't.
spent
I
Ah,
didn't
decades
finish
doing
Simisi
that.
what me
wahala. Oh.
myself I'm saying. I didn't even finish my
D
own
D need to
move.
relax
Right?
for a second.
you know
So
what,
we're
guys,
planning to do a
we're
part
gonna
three.
set up a
But wasn't
part
this
three.
room scheduled already, like for
No,
ages?
this room was scheduled to end at 12. We went by 16 minutes already because what was being discussed was very important. So we're going to schedule a part three. So the new room is the Scramble for Africa, and that's the link I post up there. Please, I enjoy all of you to go there. I mean, D is going to be there. We're going to be there. And this conversation might technically continue in case their conversation
Exactly.
switch. But let
Exactly.
us go to that room, and that's the Rubicon, guys. That's where the unity of the Yoruba nation, the Niger Delta nation, every nation, that's where we unite. So let us all navigate there as I speak. I'm going to close this room within the 1 minute, but I'll give everybody opportunity to click on that link and let the navigation continue. Thank you so much. D, thank you so very much, man. And
Yeah, so
Gunka,
thank
in
you.
fact,
I'm also going to join the room right away. I just want to thank everybody. Sometimes I don't look at my PTR when I'm speaking.
no, no. Seriously, we need to continue this. I think this Awolowo thing is beyond what we can rush through. That's what we are finding out.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you. See you in the other room. Thank you.
So I'm ending this room at the count of 3, 2, 1, 0.